Thank you for attending the June 9th, 2025 meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. This evening's agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. Printed agendas are available for our guests in the back, or you may find the agenda on your mobile device by connecting to the district's website at www.wcsoh.org. Click on our district link, select Board of Education, and follow Board Docs link to our current meeting agenda. There will be an opportunity for public comment this evening. There's a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board, and the timer will be shown on the screen. This portion of the meeting shall be limited to no more than 60 minutes. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Altman?
Here.
Mr. Heckelman is absent. Mrs. Valentine?
Here.
Mrs. Lieband?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer?
Here. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have the exciting part of the evening, district highlights and recognitions. 3.01, we are the Ville Sportsmanship Awards, and welcome Miss Yanni. And then after you, we'll welcome up Mr. Elfritz.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight, I'm excited to bring a meaningful recognition within our district, the We Are the Ville Sportsmanship Award. This award honors and celebrates qualities that extend beyond the playing field and into our daily lives: sportsmanship, community, and positive attitude. It emphasizes that while success in athletics is important, the true measure of character lies in how we conduct ourselves, support others, and contribute positively to our community. Each season, this award recognizes one middle school student and one high school student whose integrity, respect, kindness, and leadership set an exceptional standard. Students are nominated by their coaches and then carefully reviewed by a panel of community leaders committed to highlighting those who exemplify the district's values. Along with receiving a commemorative plaque, the recipients' names will be added to a traveling trophy, which will be displayed proudly within their respective schools. We are especially grateful to the Westerville Education Foundation for their generous grant, which helps to make this recognition possible. Would Cameron and Jackson Childress, Coach Mike Mahoney, Athletic Director Tom Denny, and Principal Scott Gaddis please join me? Mike Mahoney of Genoa Basketball stated in his nomination that Cameron and Jackson Childress led by example with hard work and determination. They were sponges, listening and learning, but also working to improve their game. They were fantastic teammates, always staying positive and leading by example. They never talked trash, never argued with an official, and literally did exactly what the coaches asked, all of the time. I know that there are many deserving student athletes for this award, which speaks volumes to the wonderful culture our leaders have passed down. I truly feel these two boys deserve to be recognized together. In some cases, two is better than one. Congratulations, Cameron and Jackson. And we would like to present the traveling trophy on behalf of Cameron and Jackson to Tom Denny, the athletic director, and Scott Gaddis, the principal of Genoa. Congratulations to Genoa. Next up, if we could have Ethan Burns and athletic director Andy I of Westerville Central. Max Shawver, the varsity basketball coach at Westerville Central, shared in his nomination, Ethan Burns is the true definition of what it means to be a leader. He is led by his morals and high standards on a daily basis and stays true to who he is no matter the circumstances. We had a challenging start to the season, but Ethan continued to stay positive and encourage his teammates to the best of his ability. I believe his leadership was a huge reason for our success towards the end of the season. He never gave up. Along with his leadership qualities, Ethan is also a 4.0 plus student. This exemplifies his discipline and hardworking mindset to be able to maintain superior grades along with competing in two very demanding varsity sports. I believe Ethan is a perfect example of what it means to be a Westerville athlete, both on and off the field. When things get tough or he's faced with adversity, he doesn't falter. He rises up to the occasion each and every time. Congratulations, Ethan. And Andy I, the athletic director from Central, please accept this traveling trophy on Ethan's behalf for you to display at Central. And now, Wes, if you want to come on up to the podium. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mrs. Hamburg and Mrs. Marshall and members of the Board of Education. I want to first start by congratulating these fine young men for winning these awards, and just thank you for representing Westerville so well in your athletic endeavors. It is my pleasure to stand here with Coach David Grant as I read a resolution for endorsement to rename the wrestling room in the auxiliary gym at Westerville North High School the Grant Wrestling Room. So if you would, I'd like to read the resolution. Whereas for 21 seasons, ending in 2024, the Westerville North High School wrestling program led by Coach David Grant emerged as one of the best programs in Central Ohio, producing state champions, student athletes who went on to compete and succeed at the collegiate level, and numerous league, district, and individual state titles. Whereas Coach Grant guided the Warriors to 7 league championships, 2 top 10 state finishes, team finishes in 2008 and 2021, and 6 individual state champion wrestlers throughout his career at North. He has been named the Ohio Capital Conference Coach of the Year 7 times. Whereas Coach Grant led the Westerville North Warriors wrestling program team to numerous state qualifiers and state placers, and will be forever remembered as the most winning coach in wrestling history at Westerville North. He also began the school's first official girls wrestling program during the 2022-23 season. Therefore, be it resolved that the Westerville City Schools Board of Education and Superintendent recognize David Grant's legacy of excellence by proclaiming that the wrestling room in the auxiliary gym at North, upon David's retirement from coaching, be known as the Grant Wrestling Room. So thank you again for allowing us to come and make this endorsement. Thank you.
All right, let me give him a minute to file out. Congratulations again as you make your way out. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution for endorsement of the North High School Wrestling Room?
So moved. Second?
Ms. Marshall?
Yes. Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. Next up, thank you. We have 4.01, our superintendent's comments. Ms. Hamburg.
Thank you. I'll be very brief this evening. Big congratulations to the folks that just left us on all of their achievements. I know we had a lot of spring athletes who did really well. We'll probably have some kids that will be joining us hopefully at a future meeting, including we had a state champion in the 200 from Central, Olivia. And I know Mr. Reeves got to put her medal around her neck, so he was very excited about that. So congratulations to all of our spring athletes on their success. School funding is still continuing to be a challenge. We have more conversation that's coming this evening around that topic, but I did want to take just a moment during my comments to thank our board president, Christy Meyer, for testifying last week to the Senate Finance Committee. Very appreciated. We've continued to try to have a presence down at the State House, and just really appreciate the time that you took to do that. And then my last item is I just wanted to welcome Monica Asher, who's here with us this evening, pending board approval, will be our new Executive Director of Secondary School. So we're excited to have her here this evening and have her join the team pending board approval. So welcome to Monica. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Well, next up, we have public comments. And just as a reminder, the Board of Education welcomes public comment on educational issues of interest to our school community. The board does not discriminate based on the identity or viewpoint of the speaker during our public participation. However, the board president may limit comments that are obscene, abusive, or harassing. In an attempt to protect the privacy interests of our students, the board asks that speakers not identify students by name during their comments. Persons having public complaints about district personnel, programming, or operations will be referred to the process set forth in Board Policy 9130. Finally, the board reminds speakers that their statements should be directed to the board as a whole and not to individual board members. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. A timer will be shown on the screens, and Mr. Reeves will call time when 3 minutes has elapsed. So tonight, our first speaker is Mickey Bumpus. Did I say that right? Bumpus. Welcome.
It's great to see all the student athletes and the recognition that they received. I'd like to say good evening. I'm Mickey Bumpus, and I reside at 248 East College Avenue. I have 2 grandchildren who attend Mark Twain. One is in kindergarten, and the other is in 4th grade. My kindergartner experienced a wonderful year with David Walker, and my 4th grader experienced an equally great year in Angie Lee's class. My family feels so fortunate to walk away from the 2024 school year with joy in our hearts and the excitement of experiencing the 25-26 school year, with the same enthusiastic teachers and warm climate that Mark Twain offers its families. But I understand that the future for several classrooms that will impact my granddaughter and many others looms in the unstable hands of our state legislators, who feel that dismantling many programs that impact students is less important than the $600 million grant given to build a football stadium. And we all know what football can do to brain. As a board, you also have the daunting task of dismantling our 5-star schools in hopes of balancing your budget, as well as diminishing hope for our dedicated educators and students who count on our schools to provide so much needed services. I understand that due to the uncertainty of the state funding for schools and a number of other critical services that support students and families, you're proposing to eliminate a 1st and 4th grade classroom the next school year at Mark Twain. I have seen classroom numbers for the past 2 school years, and I would like to see the projection information for the 25-26 school year. If a teacher is moved from Mark Twain, that would put the class size at 30 students for 2 first grade classes. This is 2 students above the district class size cap. It also does not allow for move-ins over the summer or during the school year. How do you propose to address exceeding the 28 student class size? I would like to see your proposed cuts and understand your rationale for the priority of services to students at the ground level. Does that mean you only have 30 seconds left? I've been in your shoes before, serving on a school board in another district. Many say it's a thankless job. I'd like to thank you for your time and effort. I know you're not in it for the thanks, but for what your expertise can offer to continue to make the Westerville public school system the shining example of what happens when leadership makes the right decisions, when building leadership leads to make things better for their teachers, and when tough decisions are thoroughly examined and prioritized that makes the least educational impact. Can I have just 15 more seconds? Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Miss Bumpus, if you wouldn't mind, if you want to leave it with Scott, we can read the rest of your comments. And appreciate it. Thank you. With Mr. Reeves, yeah, right there. Next up, and I apologize, I'm having a hard time reading this last name, so is it Bethany Kunkel?
I am stepping in, so Jen Arnold had hoped to speak, which is why I put the word Jen.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for hearing our concerned voices at Mark Twain. My name is Bethany Kungle, and I'm a parent of an incoming first grader. As you know, we remain concerned about class sizes next year in light of teacher transfers. I'm stepping in for Jen, who had hoped to speak, and in her behalf, I simply want to voice some questions that we continue to have. The first one is similar to what Mickey shared, is there a version of the enrollment numbers prepared for the 2025-26 school year? Have these numbers accounted for kids moving to the magnet program? We recognize that we might lose some to that program, but we're unsure how many. I'm on the third point. Students who attended Mark Twain for kindergarten through open enrollment, we understand may not be allowed to continue at Mark Twain if we do lose that third first grade classroom. And it stands to reason that this concept may also apply to the incoming fourth grade class. Our hope is that you would please consider giving Mark Twain an appropriate number of overflow students to enable those students to stay. And similarly, do those numbers that were published account for students who may not be able to continue at Mark Twain? Excuse me while I take a second. Okay, if first grade usually has the most additions between kindergarten and first grade, and usually late in the summer, particularly at Mark Twain, then why not keep 3 classes for this cohort of students through their first grade year to allow the class size to stabilize? Then if it remains small, consider reducing this cohort's future number of classrooms or allowing other students from the district to open enroll into Mark Twain if desired. Some buildings have class sizes in the low 20s. Between 21 and 24 students. How is it more beneficial for students to sit in classes of 30 or 28 rather than 19 to 21-ish? It seems more inequitable to have large classes at Twain than to have Twain sitting low for a year or two. Enrollment numbers from this year show that as students move up, there are places like first grade and fourth grade that the class sizes would be 30 plus if there were only 2 teachers. So again, please consider that as we plan for next year. And lastly, the average class size number that is shown for each school only calculates for non-special ed students. When those numbers are taken into account, the average class sizes go up. Why is 2 the allotment for that? And aren't there actual numbers of current students on plans that should be included in IEPs and 504s? Forgive me. Thank you for reading through that with me. Of course, let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I imagine if you could share your questions, we caught some of them, but if you could share them with Mr. Reeves. Thanks. All right. Next up, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting held on May 19th, 2025?
So moved. Second.
Any comments or? Okay. Will you take the vote?
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And then 7.01, board member compensation. May I have a motion to approve the resolution to approve compensation for board members whose term begins on or after January 1st, 2025?
So moved. Second.
Any questions, comments?
Real quick. That should be 2026.
6. Oh, yeah.
I
Sorry.
apologize for that.
I just realized that when you said that. Okay, so can we just restate it so we don't, people aren't confused? May I? Huh?
You would need to make an amendment.
That's fine. If you just want to restate the motion with the 2026,
Yeah.
we can correct the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we need to.
Okay.
They didn't approve the agenda, so.
So may I have a motion to approve the resolution to approve compensation for board members whose term begins on or after January 1st, 2026?
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you for catching that.
Apologize for that. That was my mistake on the agenda.
Okay, I sometimes write 1946.
Is it okay if I talk about this?
Yes.
So under Ohio law, board member compensation, board members may be compensated up to $125 per school board meeting, not to exceed $5,000 per year. So anyone that thinks that school board members are in this for the money, that is not the case. We currently have 2 board seats compensated at $125 and 3 compensated at $80 per meeting. The decision was made to move to that $125 amount prior to the last board elections, and so we would like to have those compensations adjusted so that everyone's at the same compensation rate. And as we're having conversations about, people running for school board and all of those things, it's important to understand that you all can't vote on your own compensation, and so we want to set it for any future terms for school board members, whoever may serve. Does that make sense?
And I just want to underscore that because I've seen some things on social media about highly paid board members that I had to just do a little correction on. So that is all board members are paid, is per meeting. I just want
Yes.
to make that clear. We are paid for the time that we sit up here in the meeting.
Yes, I have had numerous records requests for school board member salary amounts, and I make sure people understand we don't pay you a salary. You're just compensated a per meeting rate. That's not very much. I'm sorry. That's
I
what's
think-
allowed under law, and that's not the case for city
Yeah.
council, for township trustees. School board members are just in a league of their own in this space.
And obviously, there's a lot of time that goes in outside of the time you sit up at the table, but just to
But
be
you're not
clear.
compensated
right.
for that either, so.
And
Thank you for
obviously,
your service.
we're not in it for the money, obviously, yeah, yeah. I think we're losing
We
money
appreciate your
sometimes.
service though, so, thank you.
Thank you for explaining all that.
Are you ready for? a vote?
Yep.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Levan?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the purchases in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 570541D1 and Board Policy 6320?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Marshall, will you talk to us about these?
Yes, thank you. So these are what we affectionately call in and out purchase orders. This is where we have a purchase order that was opened after an invoice date or goods or services were ordered. So we have 3 on this board agenda. We have one with buildings and grounds for break fire, which is Silco Fire and security. And so we had some past due invoices that had never been received by buildings and grounds or accounting. These were budgeted for, but those purchase orders had long been closed. So we'll need your approval for that because it does exceed that $3,000 threshold. And then food service, we had one for food service for Imperial Dade for food service supplies. And we had a purchase order, but it wasn't enough to cover the full purchase amount. And so we have to have that on here. And then teaching and learning had one with Columbus City Schools for the educational services and tuition for students. So this is where we have a student who might be placed in a facility in the Columbus City School District area, and the Columbus City School District facilitates the education of that student, but they reside in our district. We're responsible for that cost of education. And so we have to have that agreement with Columbus City Schools to be able to pay that. There were also purchase orders open, but it wasn't enough to cover. And we will have another one of these, I know, coming in at a later date for the second. I think this is for the first semester. We'll have a second semester.
I was just going to add on that last one, those are very hard to budget for. So we do have a purchase order, but Anytime a kid has an extenuating circumstance, it's usually an emergency type situation, and we don't know about it ahead of time.
Yeah, and these are usually pretty big invoices too, because it's the whole time that they're in and all the educational services. I just want to make it clear that these aren't Columbus City School students that we're paying for. They're our students. They're just being educated by, yeah.
Thank you. So when we say facility, sometimes they're maybe in a hospital or something and located
Or
in.
might be in a detention center or
Yeah,
something.
and they're located in the Columbus area. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, yeah.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, and may I take the personnel consent agenda as one? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the personal consent agenda 8.01 through 8.13?
So moved.
Second. And welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Lieband, members of the board, Ms. Marshall, and Ms. Hamburg. Tonight's personnel consent agenda includes action items with regard to resignations, retirements, leaves of absence, contract status changes, change of assignments, one-time pays, and other employment-related matters. I would like to recognize Elizabeth Wyand as our sole retiree on tonight's agenda. Elizabeth has 30 years of service in Westerville City Schools, and we appreciate all of her efforts for our students, staff, and the community, and certainly wish her the best in her years of retirement ahead. Within item 8.10, I do want to call attention to the summer MTSS curriculum work being done. We know this is a major focus for our district as we continue to support all of our students with their instruction and learning. The majority of these training sessions are paid with Title II funds, which are federal dollars required to be used specifically for professional development. So I just wanted to call that out. Lastly, within item 8.13, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Monica Asher, who is being recommended to replace Ann Baldwin in the position of Executive Director of Secondary Schools. As you know, Ann is moving to the Director of State and Federal Programs and Enrollment Services position, which has combined two of our administrator retirees positions into one role. Ms. Asher has served in administrative roles for the last 16 years, including the past 3 as the principal of Olentangy Orange High School. Prior to her work in Olentangy, she served as the principal at Chagrin Falls High School, assistant principal at Rocky River High School, assistant principal at Avon Lake High School, and as the athletic director of Huron High School. Before her administrative experiences, Monica taught English at the high school level at Huron. Ms. Asher completed both her bachelor's degree and master's degree at Bowling Green State University. No Falcons out there? Okay, a couple of them. Quiet Falcons. She was the 2022-23 Ohio Principal of the Year and is currently the president of the Ohio Association of Secondary School Administrators, known as OASA. So with that said, we welcome Monica, and at this time I can take any questions you may have.
No questions, just congratulations to Beth and welcome to Monica.
I wanted to say the same thing. So welcome, Monica. We're happy to have you here. Congratulations, Anne, on your new role. And Beth Wyand is math teacher superstar. All 3 of my kids had amazing teachers. We have the best teachers. Sorry to see her retire, but glad she's going to get to go have some fun and has changed the lives of so many kids. So thanks.
Ready for the vote?
Yep.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. All right, moving along on to old business. Can we take this as one too? All right. May I have a motion to approve 9.01 through 9.03?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, comments? All right, ready to take the vote.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And up next is new business. 10.01, first reading of policy 2260.02, single gender classes and activities. Welcome, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you. Good evening. This policy reaffirms our district's commitment to equal educational opportunities for all students, and the updates in this policy outline the limited circumstances under which single-gender classes or activities may be offered, emphasizing compliance with Title IX and any other related laws. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just wanted to say I appreciated recently, so choruses are in here, about basing choruses on vocal range that may result in a chorus or choruses of one or predominantly one sex. And I noticed at one of our high schools recently that this is sort of ancillary to the policy, but that we're referring to not so much as men's chorus and women's chorus, but as bass tenor, soprano, alto, and that type of thing, because there is a lot of crossover in voices. So just, I saw that in the policy and wanted to appreciate that our high schools are making, it seems to be a change that way.
Yes, that will be at all 3 high schools.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Great, thank you. Next up, we have the first reading of Policy 2370, Educational Opportunities. Welcome, Mr. McElwain.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Good evening, Ms. Hamburg, Ms. Marshall, members of the board. It is my absolute pleasure to present to you the first reading of revisions to Board Policy 2370 for educational options. This policy is recommended for language revisions due to changes and updates in district processes. Some of the revisions are just some general wording pieces, but these revisions do reflect current Ohio law, and the recommendations are needed to make sure that we maintain accurate policies. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those at this time.
Any questions? Okay. Don't go far, right? Because you're here for the next one, or student handbooks, for first reading of student handbooks.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Meyer. It is my absolute honor and pleasure to present to you the elementary, middle school, and high school handbooks for the 2025 and 2026 school year. I know we're all excited. Just as a refresher, the handbooks every year go through a committee review, and we could look at different policies, different changes, and different updates we need to do throughout the course of the school year to get ready for the next school year. This is a very, I guess you would say, intensive and a very wide-ranging process, and we have a lot of people that are involved with this, and a lot of people that we need to thank for their time and for their efforts on this committee. One of them is actually in the back of the room. Mr. Matt Davis, if you would please stand up and be recognized. Thank you for the work on the handbook covers. They look beautiful, and we thank you for your efforts with that. Shannon Lancia is a member of our Westerville Parent Council, and all the members of the Westerville Parent Council. They gave a lot of input and thoughts with the handbook for this year, and we thank them for their time and for their efforts with doing that. WA President Kelly Modlick and the WA staff members at the elementary school, middle school, and high school levels. We had representation from all 3 levels, and we appreciate them and their work on this handbook. My secretary, Mrs. Bussard, and her work and her key insights with this work as well. And our Westerville City Schools administrators from the elementary school, middle school, and high school levels. So once again, a very wide-ranging group that we had involved with this. And I would definitely would not like to forget this young man, but Mr. Alan Hunt from the Westerville City Schools Transportation Department always has lots of great insights as we go through this process. So definitely want to thank him for his time as well. So it was a very, very wide-ranging process. Included with the recommended handbook are the recommended changes, so you kind of have a menu of what those changes are recommended and looking at there. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions at this time.
Could I just take a moment to thank you? I really appreciate your leadership on this. I know the board members have the list of changes, but just the amount of changes in board policy that are the result of legal changes that you've had to incorporate into all the handbooks. I know that's a ton of work, and so thank you for your leadership with that.
I would just say thank you to everybody. These are, I took time to read through them. They're super long, and I know that you guys probably were very critical and read every single word and spent a lot of time. So thank you to everybody that put so much time in.
No questions. I also just wanted to thank you all for your hard work.
And of course, I want to thank you all. And I want to remind students that people put a lot of work into these. So you should read every word.
And not just say you did read it. Yeah. That's true.
Check the box.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have the first reading of Policy 5136, Personal Communication Devices. Welcome, Mr. Stifler.
Good evening. So it is my absolute honor and pleasure to bring Policy 5136, Personal Communications, in front of the board. This policy brings our district policy for personal communication devices in line with Ohio House Bill 250. So it places limits on student personal communication devices with exceptions for students who have IEP 504 or student health concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have about the policy.
Any questions?
No questions, or I guess I do have a question. What steps are we taking to kind of, I guess, inform families of this specific change so that coming into the new school year, they know of limitations to those personal devices?
So the limitations that are outlined here are already in line with the district policy we had and our administrative guidelines. So there's really not much of a change. Obviously, they'll get an opportunity to see what we've talked about here. And if there turns out to be more, we can discuss it with our communication team on appropriate ways to communicate it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much. All right, next up, we have the first reading of elementary courses of study updates. Welcome, Ms. Toma.
Oh, good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Liban, members of the board, Ms. Marshall, and Ms. Hamburg. I am so excited, maybe not as excited as Nick and Tim, but we have 4 courses of study that we're bringing to you. The first one is the preschool course of study. We're really excited about that. Suzanne Kyle and Jill Fogel have been an integral part, as well as their teachers, in identifying which of the required materials we were going to use. As a reminder, this was part of the approved curriculum list that we needed to come into compliance with. So there were some changes. The state kind of went back and forth and offered a free resource. And so we waited and did our due diligence to look at what they were offering and ended up going with that resource. So we're excited. It is not entirely free, so I do not want anybody to be confused there. There are portions that we will get, and then we have to fold in some other resources with it. Also very excited about our elementary English learners K-5 course of study. Jennifer Winters headed that work up along with a team of teachers. We started this work last year, and so we're excited. It went really well this year using different resources. Great partnership with the company as well, just in terms of training and adaptability. So it's been a really good year, and a lot of hard work went into it. So we're really excited about those resources. And then, as promised, I've been working on this for a couple years with physical education and visual arts. So those were the last 2 of the related arts course of studies that we've been working on, and they were finalized over the course of this school year as well. So I'm happy to take any questions.
I know a lot of work goes into this too, right? A lot of time, a lot of feedback, a lot of training. So just really appreciate the intentionality of everybody involved in making sure that this came together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I guess I'm curious about professional development for teachers.
Yeah, so both of these have a professional development component, but what we find sometimes is we also have a great team of our curriculum specialists, so we tend to use pieces of both. We might do some training with the company directly, but we find that when our curriculum specialists get their hands into it, I don't want to say Westervelize it, but it's they'll come out and do a packaged professional development, and that's a great starting point, but it's really our teachers here bringing it to life and adjusting and adapting. And then as we use it, we always get better and better. So it's kind of twofold, and that will continue.
Thank you. And do you know what the timing for the PD will be relative to
So
implementation?
Yeah, so preschool will start this summer and continue ongoing over the course of next school year with a heavy emphasis on PD, and then you kind of spread it out. EL started this year, and so they've had professional development, and that will continue as well. But again, that first year is that integral part of we got to figure this out and experience it, and then adjust and adapt as we go. So it'll start in the summer, and then be offered at every WE Day, as well as staff meetings, things like that as well.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
I just have a follow-up question. So as you guys are learning more and Westervelizing it,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you are talking amongst each other and figuring out and training each other and saying this worked, this didn't. Those are happening regularly.
Yeah, so teacher feedback is a huge part of it. So we try to kind of do it with fidelity when we first experience a new resource, but it is bringing it to life and adjusting it for the students that we serve in Westerville. And so that teacher communication, as well as going back and forth with the vendors we use, it's a huge partnership. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done and some of the adjustments we've made in other areas. So I'm pretty confident this will be no different in terms of let's use it, let's figure out what works best for our students.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I don't know, your energy was pretty high in excitement. All right, we have our first reading of high school courses of study and material update, and you are not Miss Knapp. Welcome, Miss Baldwin.
Thank you. Good evening. I apologize. Dr. Knapp was unexpectedly unable to attend this evening, so I'm filling in. And I was able to be a part of Curriculum Council, so I'm pretty familiar with all of these updates that are before you. And it's in alignment with our curriculum adoption process, along with the College Board requirements for advanced placement or AP courses, that we're bringing several courses of study updates for your review, as well as some materials for advanced placement courses. Pre-calculus, honors, pre-calculus, American history, and honors American history were up as part of our curriculum adoption process, and teams of instructors met with our curriculum instruction specialist as well to review those courses of study and update them based on pacing and ODU standards. 3 of our science courses, AP Biology, AP Chemistry, and AP Environmental Science, were updated to align with the College Board course updates that recently came out. And then 3 of our social studies courses, AP European History, AP US History, and AP Psychology, are due for textbook replacements. College Board asked that those materials be within 10 years, and we are at that mark. And so those courses will need new materials. They have been budgeted as part of our curriculum instruction process. And then I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'll just say, again, thank you. This takes a lot of work too, right? So just thanks to everybody that had participated in this.
Yeah, we appreciate our classroom instructors being a big part of this
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much. Okay, next up we have recommended action in standing business, 11.01. May I have a motion to approve the resolution declaring impracticality of transportation?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Ms. Dennis.
Well, good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Lieband, members of the board. Ohio Revised Code allows for public schools to determine the impracticality of transportation after consideration of a number of factors, including but not limited to the cost of providing transportation and the number of students to be transported. The Department of Purchasing and Logistics has evaluated each listed private non-public school student per the requirements of Section 3327.02 of the Ohio Revised Code and declared the 10 listed students impractical to transport. Approving this resolution will allow the district to offer payment in lieu of transportation in the manner provided for per the Ohio Revised Code at the rate set by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve declaring the listed students impractical to transport and offering payment in lieu of transportation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
I do have a question. I'm sure I just thought of this. So you probably don't have it off the top of your head, but how much on average, like a year, do we spend in lieu?
So I actually calculated out this year based on the current list of payment in lieu of students you've approved for this year up to this point. There are currently 341 students on that list. They can be paid at the rate of $583.86 per student, which puts us in or around about $199,000. Understanding that in or around means we do verify attendance prior to paying that rate. So that does play into that. So it is in and around that rate.
Okay, I thought that's what it was, so I appreciate that. That's a lot. All right, any questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Mrs. Allman?
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, and may I have a motion to approve out-of-state overnight field trips?
So moved.
Second. Welcome, Ms. Baldwin.
Good evening again. This request is for our South basketball girls team to attend a camp in Northern Ohio for a couple of days and ending their trip at Cedar Point. And this is 12 students that are attending, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do they actually get to ride the rides?
They do, so after they play their games, though.
Okay.
So they'll do that after the games.
And this is not a cost to the district, correct?
No cost to the district.
Thank you.
All right. Any other? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, and good luck to them. May I have a motion to approve the 2026 annual tax budget for the Westerville Public Library?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marshall, please explain to us why we're approving this.
Yes, thank you, President Meyer. Members of the board, so we are, the Westerville Public Library is their school district, they're not a school district library, but their footprint is the same as our footprint. And under Ohio law, we are considered their taxing authority, and the board also approves members to their board of trustees. And we also are required to approve their budget annually. Other than that, we have nothing to do with the library. Their tax levies are separate from ours. Their budgets are separate from ours. But you do appoint their board of trustees, and approve their budget every year.
Yeah, really odd, but
It's a thing in law. I don't know.
any questions or comments?
Love the library.
All right.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution to authorize change order number 1 to the owner contractor agreement with Byrne and Jones Construction for the Walnut Springs Middle School track replacement project?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome, Mr. Swartz.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm going to walk you through a couple different points here that may be new to some of you, so I apologize. So first and foremost, this is change number 1, as we said, to Byrne and Jones for the Walnut Springs Middle School track replacement project for unforeseen or unstable soil conditions. I'm going to walk you through what that is, but first I'm going to start with why are you voting on this change order? I've never seen one, probably in the 30 months I've been here. All the resolutions, or most of the resolutions awarding contracts, stipulate change orders can be approved by superintendent, treasurer, or their designee up to and or equal to an amount or an aggregate amount of 10% of the original contract. In the case of this contract, it was originally for $422,426. This change order is presented to you tonight, again, is in the amount of $153,106 even, again, to Byrne and Jones Construction. Now, why do we have this change order? Unstable or unforeseen soils, what does that mean? The original contract had us essentially removing the track surface, that part which you walk on, kind of spongy, has the court markings on it, track markings. Also, the 2 inches of top asphalt base. Below there, there's a remaining asphalt subbase, stone, and soil. What we discovered after removing the track and the 2 inches of top asphalt is the remaining asphalt, stone, and soil had lost their structural integrity. They no longer would hold any type of weight. I can go into more detail what that means, but that's the short answer. They were no longer stable to be able to afford us the opportunity to put the asphalt back in, fill in any low spots, put the asphalt back in, and reinstall the track. As such, this dollar and this scope allows us to remove that poor asphalt, if you will, the part that's lost its integrity, a little bit of stone, add some cementitious material to stabilize the stone, basically make it a giant slab, add the stone we removed back in, add the asphalt back in, and put us back to contract where we would then add 2 inches of asphalt in the track. So essentially, it's removed what we did. What was left was unstable. The only way to stabilize it is to remove it, add the cementitious material, put the material back in, and then we're back to base contract work and bring it back to a usable format. There is no other path, if you will. Right now, the tracks are unusable as they exist. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question. What is the typical lifespan of these, of the track field?
Good question. So typically it's 10 to 12. This track in particular, and the same is the case for the next resolution, only got us to about 8 or 9 years total. Again, hindsight being what it is in terms of what we discovered, this is some of the reason we believe the integrity of this subbase for some reason was failing, and hence that's why the cracks and the settling that we're telegraphing from below or above down that we could see visually are causing us to repair it sooner. These will be dollars. I know it's a large dollar amount, but doing what we're doing to stabilize the base will actually ensure us to have less risk and costs in the future, and longer return on investment for this project, actually. So we're hoping to achieve closer to 12, 13 years with this action.
Thank you. You answered my second question as well. So thank you.
I'm just curious, were these done at the same time and by the same contractor in the past? It's just curious. They're both,
I do know they were designed by the same firm. I have to admit, I have to do a little research to see if they were
okay.
undertaken by the same contractor. Odds are they were. We tend to group them together
Yeah.
in previous contracts, but I can get that to you if you need it.
Yeah, I would just be interested to know. So, okay. Thank you.
Do you know, have there been changes in how the tracks should be constructed that have led to, oh, it was constructed, well the first time, but now there's just been new research, new, changes we need to implement, or maybe there wasn't something that was quite 100% correct, and how will we make sure that doesn't happen moving forward?
Both good questions. So what was discovered, before we started, we always make sure we do some due diligence. So we worked with the original architect firm that did the original replacement 8 years ago, Triad Architects. They served as a consultant on these as well. We also looked at the drawings that were done. Those drawings called out that we should have had a combined 3 to 3.5 inches of asphalt below the track. What we discovered is in some cases, we barely had 2.5. That is some of the reason the remaining asphalt just didn't have enough thickness to have structural integrity. I can go in the weeds a little bit more of something we did at Genoa to try and salvage it because they were done a day apart to try and, knowing we found that, to try and save it, and it still couldn't save it. I'll discuss that when we get to Genoa maybe. But that was, yes, there was a fault exercise. What was installed did not match, first of all, what was designed. And without having too much of a fault, what was designed, even if it wasn't installed properly, was less than industry standard. It should have been 4 inches of asphalt. So that's actually what we're putting back.
Okay.
Is what both the association, the National Association for Tracks, and the track company we're working with, and Triad as well, agree that's the better standard. So that's where we're going here now.
Okay, and how are we ensuring that that's
So
happening?
to ensure it, what we're doing, we've got tonnage. I don't have it spelled out here in front of you. We have tonnage of material, both stone and asphalt, that we're putting back in. And every truck that comes in, we ask for a delivery ticket. And it'll give us that weight and tonnage by material, and we compare that to what was designed and make sure we're within a reasonable percentage of acceptance, what was anticipated.
Okay.
So we'll be able to check what we get against what we had requested.
Okay, and hypothetically speaking, sorry, this is my last question.
Fine.
Hypothetically speaking, if we said we don't have the money for this and we're just not putting in a track at Genoa or Walnut Springs, what would happen?
So right now, if you go out there, they both have a slight layer of asphalt. They're kind of a soupy mess because now without that integrity, that top, water and everything gets in it, so they're really not usable. So without proceeding in some fashion, they're of no use. Eventually in the summer, they could dry out and just be kind of a crusty mess, but they would not be usable by public, the PE class, anybody. And remember, football, everybody has to walk over them. They wouldn't be unsafe for humans. They just wouldn't be usable for anything relative to the district's use.
So essentially, we'd have to send the track teams somewhere else
Yes.
to have their meets. And I would imagine that would be, you'd have to bus them to the high schools or something like that. You would have extra wear and tear on those. It'd be a scheduling. You'd have to work all the scheduling in.
Correct. We wanted to maintain the services and programs we have. They could not occur at the school in question. They'd have to occur elsewhere. We'd have to work that out.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Louise asked a lot of some of the questions I had. I just had one additional question. We check the tonnage, right? You had said as it comes in. Is there ever, like before we, after we put the asphalt down, does anybody go out and look at it, inspect it before we?
We have a testing agency, GCI, on retainer. and we can bring them in if and as needed to do that. We've talked to them about this. They're in support of the process in terms of the cementitious material, proof rolling, checking the tickets, but we have them on retainer and can bring them in if and when needed.
I'm assuming that we're not using the same contractor as we did previously.
No, we're not. This contractor is new to the district, Byrne &
Okay.
Jones.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I do just have one more. This is a financial question. So, is there anything that we had planned to do that we will not now be able to do because we have to spend the extra funds?
I'll answer it this way. There was only 20,000 in this contract for contingency, so, and we
right.
were not carrying the delta and another contingency, if
Yeah.
you will. So yes, there was some shifting of future projects,
Yep.
both PI, which is how this is
Mhm.
potentially paid for, and even bond money that we still have retaining. Has there been a project we've eliminated? No, our list is still active because we were carrying an aggregate of several hundred thousand across the board, but I did not have a line item specific to these tracks that could support these change orders. So as an aggregate whole as a district, we had enough contingency. So I guess my answer would be no, we did not cancel any future projects at this time.
But we have more projects than we're funding this year.
Correct.
I want to point that out.
Yep.
Correct. This is encumbered and anticipated projects within the available dollars. Correct.
Meaning there are lots of other things we would like to do, just to be clear.
Correct.
There's always a long list.
Always
It's
more
just
ways we could spend each
pushes
dollar
things a
than,
lot of
right,
times. Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, is it vote?
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution change order number 1 to the owner contractor agreement with Byrne & Jones Construction for the Genoa Middle School track replacement project?
So moved.
Second.
And Mr. Schwartz, I know we talked a little bit about this already, but
We did, so
go ahead.
similar fact pattern, again, just to state publicly here, the dollar difference. First, back to Walnut, I should have stated, that's a 6-lane running track. Genoa's an 8-lane. That is the difference both in base contracted work and change order work. It's just a matter of scale and size is the difference. The fact pattern is exactly the same, unfortunately. The contract amount originally here was $521,541. The change order here is being proposed in an amount of $192,489. There was one difference that occurred kind of in trying to remediate. Did Walnut first, found that we had less asphalt than originally designed and originally recorded. We took 2 inches off at Walnut. We actually reduced it to 1.5 inches at Genoa the next day, thinking hopefully that inch or so remaining would have some structural integrity. While you walk on it, it looks better, it's thicker. As soon as you try to drive anything over it, it still does what's pumping. It just kind of collapses like a dry Oreo, to be blunt. That's what it kind of looks like when you walk over it. So it also has no structural integrity. And the best course of action is the same course of action. Remove the poor soils or the asphalt, stone, and a little bit of soil. Add the cementitious material. Put the stone back in. Put the base asphalt back in. And then we're back to contracted work. 2 inches of asphalt, track back in. And it's the same condition as before in terms of it's not usable. Same fact pattern in terms of what was designed. Same fact patterns in terms of the other answers, just to share.
I just have one additional question. Will these still be completed by the time the school years start? Or?
The current schedule, weather could be a factor, but assuming we don't have rain, we get a dry summer like last year, we should be fine. But if weather could be our only factor, but materials are available, the contractor is available, and has said to the best of his ability, we should still be hitting that August 2nd completion date, which is a Friday in August.
Okay, thank you.
In the off chance that we don't, will this mean that track might have to juggle some things at least too?
It'd be more of a football issue.
Yes, it's more of a football issue.
Okay.
And making sure we have a way for them to get over the track to the field.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other? All right, we can take the vote. Thank you.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution selecting Osborne Engineering for design professional services for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026 HVAC projects?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Swartz, talk to us about this.
Thank you. So again, this is not awarding a contract for somebody this may be new. This is agreeing to a recommendation to proceed to contract with Osborne Engineering for essentially our next set of large HVAC projects. Again, Ohio Revised Code says we have to do a qualifications-based selection process, so we issued a request for qualifications about 5 months ago. We received 4 responses from professional engineering firms. Those were scored by a committee, made it myself and 2 of our teammates, 2 of my team members within the facilities operations department. After scoring, it was deemed Osborne was being recommended as the most qualified. Again, there were no cost or contracts today. And with that, we made the recommendation, as it says, through the superintendent to move forward. So you're agreeing with our recommendation and ultimately authorizing superintendent treasurer, their designee, to start negotiating a contract. That contract would still come back to this body, just to remind you, for approval.
And which HVACs are we looking at this?
So I know the resolution talks about FY '25 and '26. Ultimately, they're all '26, right? But it's money we're carrying over from '25 as well as money we've assigned for FY '26. It's roughly $4 million in projects at 7 different schools. And it's all preventive maintenance. So things that are beyond or nearly beyond their useful life, air handling units, VAV boxes in classrooms. It's all very much the typical that we've done. It's not adding, if you will, a system to any school. It's simply replacing and maintaining what we have.
Sure, sure. I guess, can you just remind us, for the public's sake, which ones are we looking at? Which schools? Do you know off the top of your head?
I'd have to get the list back to
Okay.
you. I apologize.
No worries. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve a resolution to suspend Robert's Rules of Order?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Leban?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. We are going to move into our work session now.
I did do a presentation. It's more slides than I anticipated. I apologize for that. I just want to level set for a second, if that's okay. So we're going to talk about school funding and all the things. There's a lot going on right now, guys. A lot going on.
And we asked Carrie Dennis
Yeah.
and Scott Reeves to join us as we talk about some of the potential accounts that Nicole's going to discuss. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, so if you remember, we had a conversation as part of the May forecast, talk about transfers and to talk about levies and different things like that. So I promised that I would bring back some more specific things. So these are the more specific things. So I'm going to ask you to take one and pass it down if you don't mind. I'm going to go through this presentation before we go over this large spreadsheet here. So I just want to remind everybody that the cost of education in Ohio is a shared responsibility between the state and the local community. I'm actually interviewed with NBC4 today, and I stressed that very fact, and that we are just asking the state to do its part in the cost of education. And so when we look at our state share, that percentage overall, this is a heat map from the Department of Education and Workforce that shows the change in the state share percentage from last fiscal year, 24, to this fiscal year, 2025. This is where we are right there in the middle. So we saw a decrease actually of 7%. So that's a decrease of 5% or more. So last year, this biennium budget, we've seen the school funding formula keep what does the cost to educate a student what is that cost? The same for both years, but it continues to update those local wealth capacities. How wealthy is our local community? What is that state and local share percentages? And so we've seen our state share drop, but the costs stay the same. So this year alone, from last year to this year, we lost $4 million in state formula funding, even though we gained over 100 students on the formula funding with the enrollment for the formula funding. So that's the conversation we continue to have with the state to make sure that they understand how their decisions are impacting us. This is where we are in the state budget process. So we have the executive budget, that's the governor's version, we have the House's version. And you know what? We actually have the Senate's proposed version. They are expected to vote on that on Wednesday, I believe. We will see. So whatever, right now we have their proposed budget. They had hearings last week in the Senate Finance Committee to go over that proposal. Thank you, President Meyer, for testifying. I apologize that I couldn't be there. They were supposed to have amendments by Friday, and so we should see something maybe tomorrow for whatever that final version is that would be introduced in the Finance Committee to be voted out of committee to go to the full House on Wednesday. So then we're looking at this conference committee, and this is where we have a lot of those closed door discussions. Those are already happening now, I can tell you. So conference committee is where we'll have members of the House, members of the Senate come together and reconcile the differences between the state's budget process to get it to the governor's desk by June 30th for signature so it can become law by July 1st to meet the state's operating budget needs for the beginning of the fiscal year. State funding for public, so this is statewide. During the DeRolf decision, our school funding model was ruled unconstitutional, first in 1997 and 3 more times after that in the early 2000s. But during that first DeRolf decision, the state was picking up about 42% of that cost statewide. Today, they're picking up about 38% of that cost.
I have a quick question on that. So the DeRolf decision, the original came down in 97. It was ruled unconstitutional several times thereafter. Was there ever a school funding formula that was ruled constitutional?
No. And if you read the last decision, the judges basically said, you need to fix your funding formula. We're not going to hear this anymore because it's the same thing over and over again. And it was ruled unconstitutional due to the over-reliance on local property taxes and residual budgeting by the state. And when we talk about residual budgeting, we're talking about the state is prioritizing funding and then schools get basically a dollar amount that's not based on any need.
It's just what's left over.
It's just what's left over, essentially.
Okay.
So that's where we've been. And I have a slide I didn't include here, but I have a couple of slides where I show all of the different iterations of school funding models that we've had since the 90s, since the DeRolf decision. And every 2 years, we go through the state budget process and have this conversation with state lawmakers. And, I like to remind people that our lawmakers, they are not experts in school funding. They're not experts in property taxes, even though some of them like to think that they are. But there's a lot that they don't know and how a lot of these things have worked. And even if they did work in school funding or worked in property taxes in some space prior to getting in the legislature, a lot of things have changed over that same time period, right? So I view our role to just make sure that we are educating the legislators so that they can understand how their decisions will impact the 15,000 students that we educate here in Westerville and our local community. And so that's why we continue to have these conversations every couple of years. So that's where we are. Under the governor's proposal, he continued to update those local wealth calculations, did continue the Fair School Funding Plan, but kept that base cost the same at those 2022 amounts. So under the governor's proposal, we would have lost about $6.9 million over the biennium. This is an old slide. We've had that before. So our current state share is 23%. That's projected to be 11% by the end of the biennium, based on our local wealth capacity estimates. The House's proposal, the House introduced this notion of a clawback or a cap on our general fund balance, and this only would apply to school districts. It doesn't apply to other local governments in the budget bill. They introduced this clawback provision that would essentially claw back anything over 30% of our preceding year's expenses for our general fund balance. So under the House's version, we were looking at about $110 million to lose over the fiscal year 26 and 27, because it would be for tax year 25.
Can we go back one slide and just
Sure.
have one question here? So when you look at the local wealth calculations, I just want to be super clear here for everyone. This is about property wealth, right?
Property and income.
Yeah, property and income wealth, and there's a I don't know what the formula is, or how that's calculated. Because I think one of the things that we hear a lot from folks is that, I've lived in my house for 50 years. I can't afford this anymore. So there is a component of it that's looking at income, but it's not doing that in any, it's obvious, but it's not in any way, shape, or form on an individual basis, really.
No.
I mean,
it's just looking in aggregate overall for our entire school district footprint. What is our property wealth? So as property values increase, we look wealthier as a community. And, on the property value side, we look wealthier as a community, but all of our voted levies are subject to House Bill 920 reduction factors. So we don't see growth on those on those voted levies. And so our only option is to go back to the community and ask them for another levy if we need growth in our revenue. And so on the income side, so it's a 60-40 split in the calculations,
Okay.
so 40% for personal income and then 60% for property wealth. But it also takes that and compares us to the other 600 plus traditional public schools, and then it calculates based relative to the other 600 plus public schools. And so at the end of the day, I want to make sure that it's very clear to our community and really everyone that the cost of education is a shared responsibility. We are always going to have that local share. That's never going to go away regardless of the outcome of the state budget, because that's how it's set in our constitution, in our state constitution. But we have historically been underfunded based on every formula that the state's had. We've historically been a capped district. And we've never been fully funded from the state for what their portion is, for as far back as I have records to look at this. But we're always going to have that state and local share split overall. Yeah, but it doesn't take into account
Cost of living being higher
The
here.
cost
So if
of
you think
living.
about central
Right,
Ohio,
yeah.
property
Yeah.
values and incomes are higher, but
The
so
cost
is the
of living
cost
is
of living.
higher.
So
Yeah.
that's where we're not seeing the balance piece, and it is really
It kind of treats
hard.
all of us like we're the same, but it looks at our different student demographics for the different funding pieces and things like that, but not the cost of living.
If you think of other parts of the state and what you would buy
Sure.
the same property for. So that's why our percentage continues to drop.
Yeah, thank you for stepping back to walk through that, just because I think, and I'm just speaking for me, but as a board member, when I hear that, like, I absolutely understand, but like, we are only given so many tools to come up with our share,
Yeah.
and so we're sort of get backed into a corner where when the state is reducing their share, we do not have a lot of options.
Yeah, so, I mean, our options, we can't charge for our services. We, free appropriate public education, that's the rule. And our options are, if we can't have additional revenue that keeps up with inflation, then we have to make reductions to our programs and services to students. There's only so many supplies and materials and things like that that you can reduce before you start impacting people and services to students. So, I mean, that's that's the conversation that we have to continue to have as we're not seeing our revenues keep up with our inflationary increases and expenses.
And we're not allowed to decide not to spend money on students who choose not to attend our schools. There are things we have to provide for them, like the payment in lieu.
Yes.
Of transportation.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we like to call those unfunded mandates, yes.
Thank you.
So the House's proposal, that's where we first heard about the clawback. So this was essentially the net effect of the House's proposed budget. So the House's proposal sunsetted the fair school funding formula that we've had for the last two bienniums, and basically just added an additional $20 per pupil in 26 and $30 per pupil in 27. So about $687,000 over the biennium for us. But that clawback piece, the state reimburses us for some old tax levies, voted levies prior to 2013 for homeowners. And losing those tax levies through that clawback would also would reduce the state reimbursements that we get. And it's all very complicated, but essentially that would be another $10 million loss that the state is currently paying for that they would not have to pay for in the future. So the Senate's proposal, they kept the clawback provision. Did you have a question?
I was just going to ask you if you could dig a little deeper on that, just so people out in the audience or that are watching, when you mean like the 10, we lose an additional.
So prior to 2013, any levy voted in prior to 2013, the state paid for 10% of that for all property owners at the 10% rollback. And then there was an additional 2.5% owner occupancy credit. So 12.5%, if you own your home, you live in your home, you occupy it, you saw a 12.5% reduction. The state exempted you from paying that, but then the state reimburses the schools for that lost revenue. That went away on all new levies after beginning in November of 2013. And so if the state essentially passes a law that reduces our old voted levies, and then we have to pass new levies, those new levies don't have that reimbursement attached to it. So every new levy for a homeowner after 2013 was 12.5% more expensive. And because the state was no longer picking up that tab. And I mean, call me cynical, but I feel like some of this might be a way for the state to get away from paying that portion of the local property taxes that they've been historically paying for. It comes up every budget cycle. So I feel like maybe that might be a piece to this and what they're doing. So the Senate's proposal that just came out would require the county budget commission to claw back 50%. So instead of 30%, they bumped it up to 50%. Still conversations about that. I would love to see that go away. And all of the amendments that are that came in on Friday. So we'll see what comes from the Senate side of things. And then the state funding formula. I don't have the detailed calculations with their the Legislative Services Commission put out simulations for districts, but essentially what they put out in the simulations, we would lose about $426,000 over the biennium. And with that clawback, we would also have that potential loss in state reimbursements as well, along with the clawback. And I do just want to point out this whole cash cap or clawback. There are a lot of legislators right now that are referring to this as immediate tax relief for all Ohioans. And that's just simply a misstatement because this wouldn't affect every school district. And the consequence, I guess, the outcome of this means you will see districts around the state that haven't been on the ballot in decades that will need to immediately be on the ballot for new operating funds. And so, regardless of what you think of Westerville and what our situation is, this is impacting statewide. And we also have a lot of things that I think will have a lot of unintended consequences if something like this goes through, which I want to talk a little bit about. Are you going to say something?
I was going to ask, so they're touting this as property tax relief. Do we have any idea, like district to district, if they do these clawbacks, what the property owners are actually going to receive back, when they would receive it back? Because I can't imagine it's going to be you're not going to get a check for thousands of dollars.
No. So there's been a few county auditors that have said that it would be a minimal amount that any property owner would actually see.
And it would be more they wouldn't collect the next year versus here's a refund check.
Yeah.
But our
would be
concern too
minimal.
is just the instability
Yeah.
of,
Oh,
so
yeah.
people are going to be very confused because they would have this very temporary reprieve and then it would go right back on. And so, concerns about people not understanding that. And then we're trying to pass levies and they think we've just hit them with a new levy when it's really our levy we already had.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's also my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but they are saying essentially this is property tax relief, right? We'll have to actually go back to our property owners and say, we actually need more money, but they look like the good guys, and then they're putting restrictions on us around levies too. So essentially, I mean, they have all the great talking points, but they're squeezing school districts, public education across the state.
Yeah, and I think, we always talk about with the state's budget process, there's always winners and losers, right? You have some schools that are winners of a state budget process and some schools that are losers of the state budget process. And I like to remind our legislators that our students are continually losers of the state's budget process. There hasn't been a state budget in recent years that has where Westerville School students has been a winner on the winning end of whatever those calculations look like. And I mean, we have continued to be underfunded. And they're applying, so we have districts around the state, over 400 of them, that are at that 20 mil floor. So there's a provision in state law that says House Bill 920 works for school districts to reduce that millage until they get to 20 mils. We're well above that. We're nowhere near that 20 mil floor. But for those 400 plus districts, if their values went up by 35%, the residents' taxes went up by 35%. But that's not us. But they're treating us all like we're all in the same situation, and we're not. And that's what we try to educate them, that we're not on the same.
When we say that we're being underfunded, specifically with the Fair School Funding Plan, that plan calculated the amount that it costs to educate a child based on actual costs of educating the child, not, well, we only have this much money left over, let's just divvy it up, correct?
Right. So in theory, yes, that's the idea behind the Fair School Funding Formula. When it was first implemented in 2022, so it was for the 2022 and 2023 biennium, we were funded for both of those years based on what does it cost to educate a student in 2018.
True.
So now we're in 24 and 25, and so for this biennium, we've been compensated based on what does it cost to educate a student in 2022.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, we have all of those categorical add-ons. So we're just talking about those base costs, 2022 cost sets. The state has done studies for special education, for gifted education, for career tech education, economically disadvantaged, all of those things. They did those costs and studies in 2022. We're still waiting on the one for the disadvantaged pupils, the economically disadvantaged. The state hasn't released that yet. We were supposed to have that in December of 24. Still don't have that. But they have those cost studies from 2022, and they can see that those categoricals are severely underfunded. We've been focusing on special education. I have a slide to show that. But so we have those categoricals haven't been updated. We're using old base cost inputs. And then we're only funding a portion of the overall formula. So right now, we're at 67% roughly. Yeah. And so it's, we're underfunded on several levels overall.
So ideally, the cost would be whatever it costs, ideally this year to educate a child. If not this
Or at
year,
least
then
last
last
year.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
That-
state has all that data. We
Yes.
send our data to them weekly.
Yeah.
They have all of our.
And they'd be funding the formula at the 100%, which was the plan
Yeah.
for this biennium, but they're kind of going back on that.
It was meant to be phased in over 6 years.
Okay.
If I could, just on the underfunded piece, it's really just underscoring what the two of you were just talking about, which is that when we say that the state is underfunding, that is not us deciding how much we think we need to spend on students. This is the complex calculations in the Fair School Funding formula, and the state, it's a shared responsibility, so we understand they're not going to fund 100% of, when we say 100%, that means 100% of their share.
Right.
They're not going to fund 100% of educating every child.
Right.
We have to do our part, but we should really be able to figure out what it should cost to educate a kid in Ohio. That's what the whole effort was for. So if the cost inputs are updated and so on, everybody should know what a reasonable amount is to educate a child, and you bring the categoricals in, looking at your
They worked
district.
with the American Institute for Research for
Right.
those cost studies.
Yeah.
They have reports on the Department of Education and Workforce's website.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is the state does know, but when we say underfunding, it's really easy to gloss by that word. I'm glad you pulled it out. They know how much it should cost, and they are, in our case, just deciding to pass it on to the local taxpayers. So I just want to make that clear. We are not making those numbers up.
So Nicole, really quick, and not to belabor the point, but can you tell us how much we've been underfunded since 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, so we had calculated that just over $29 million just since 2021, which would have been the year before the Fair School Funding Plan came into place. And we were getting much closer to actually being funded, at least what the formula calculates. We're not even funded what the formula calculates at this point because of that phase-in process. And so, when you hear conversations from legislators about they don't want to fund empty desks or whatever that looks like. I don't know how they can have that conversation about any school district in Ohio, even schools that have lost significant enrollment, if they've not ever fully funded a formula and updated all of the cost inputs and the categoricals and all that. So I will say that is something that the Senate had a lot of conversations about, and the Senate's proposal does include continuing guaranteed amounts for school districts. But based on 2021 levels, which is net 2021 levels, but it's net of all of the deductions we had at that time for private and charter schools. So it's that's a whole nother conversation that isn't really relevant right now. But it's I think at the end of the day. There was a lot of research that went into the Fair School Funding Plan. I think it's important that we're able to maintain that formula. I think that we can eventually get to a place to where our funding formula meets the state's responsibility. We just need the legislature to kind of see that vision when we talk about, educating Ohio's children and what we want for the future of Ohio. And we want every kid, regardless of their zip code, to have an honest opportunity at life. I think that it's important that the legislators think about that and have those conversations.
I think it's also really important to remember that this was a bipartisan developed plan with professionals in this field, rather than just saying, here's what we have left over. This doesn't work. We're just going to throw it out.
So the Senate's proposal does continue the Fair School Funding formula, continuing at those 2022 cost inputs. and whatever other calculations. They also added something for performance, what they talk about funding for outcomes, for if you were a 4 or 5 star district, and also if you saw growth in your progress measures and all of that on the report card, there was some additional dollars for that. So we meet both of those, but somehow we're still being reduced over the biennium. And I think it has to do because our state share is going to continue to be updated. And then there's a change with the disadvantaged pupil impact aid, which is the categorical funding for our economically disadvantaged students. Right now, our students are counted based on free and reduced lunch applications that we do through food service, and that's how they're coded in our student information system. The Senate's version is doing something about moving us to a direct certification from the county, which would reduce the overall economically disadvantaged number, which I think would reduce that disadvantaged pupil impact aid over the biennium for us. Again, haven't seen any detailed calculations, just reading the language of the 5,500 plus page.
Is this also still assuming the 2022 cost inputs?
Yes. Yeah, it still continues the 2022 cost inputs. I stopped working. It's not working, Jennifer. My pointer works. It's a Google slide. It might have froze up on us. Thank you. So just a reminder, the Auditor State introduced financial health indicators for school districts, and talks about the larger the reserve, the better the entity is able to absorb in the short term, the impact of sudden revenue loss or significant increases in operating costs. And then cautionary outlook. So if our fund balance represents less than 6 months or 50% of current year revenues, and so the Senate is proposing 50% of current year expenses. Revenues and expenses aren't that far from each other. So, and that talks about a decline of the last 3 periods. So that's what's happening on the auditor side. The other piece that I'm trying to stress to legislators, so this was a member brief that was shared by Standard & Poor's, which is a credit rating agency. And it says, potential for property tax reform. Property taxes are a foundational credit strength for Ohio schools given their relative stability as a source of revenue. In response to double-digit appraisal increases, state legislators are exploring property tax reform legislation, potentially leading to reduced property revenues for school districts, which could materially affect our view of school districts' institutional framework and revenue and expenditure balance. So what does this mean? Standard & Poor's, Moody's is another rating agency that we work with. If we go out to issue bonds, they rate our credit essentially. And so we are highly rated and continue to be highly rated because of the stability of our tax revenue, because our bonds are backed by property taxes. And the conversation, I've had conversations with folks at Moody's and Standard & Poor's, is that this whole conversation around property tax reform could devalue bonds for all of Ohio's entities, not just schools, in the future, if the state legislature is willing to make these very large changes that could impact the reliability of that revenue overall. So if our bonds are valued lower, that means we pay higher interest rates, which means our community pays higher interest rates overall. Or if we're even able to sell the bonds to be able to address the projects. And just a reminder, we last issued bonds from the 2019 ballot issue that we had that helped renovate several schools. We added secure vestibules across our district at all of our schools. We opened Minerva France and Minerva Park. We updated a lot of the parking lots and playgrounds across the district. That was a $103 million bond issue. We're part of the state's facilities program, the Expedited Local Partnership Program. We have built up over $25 million in credits with those projects that the state has not funded us for yet, because again, we're on a list with the other school districts and our turn is not up for us to be funded for those projects. And so anything that we would do facilities-wise, we'll have to do with local resources until the state pays its share of those funds as well. And our percentage is 35%. The state is supposed to share 35% of every dollar that the cost of these projects are with us.
And we don't have any semblance of an idea of when our turn would be up?
Oh, so let me tell you, I started with the district in 2018, and I worked with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission in my previous district. And so I reached out to the folks that I knew from there, and I asked them, I was like, hey, when will Westerville? And they're like, oh, you're probably about 6 or 7 years out. And I was like, oh, okay. So then in 2020, I reached out to them. They said, oh, you're probably about 6 or 7 years out. And this last year, we reached out to them. What did they say? Probably about 6 or 7 years. Yeah. So no, I don't know. I do know that the state has been putting more money into help fund some of those projects and stuff. But again, Westerville Schools hasn't had that opportunity yet. So we continue to.
Where does that money come from?
It's from the state's appropriation budget, their capital budget.
Okay, and are they just not funding that at an appropriate level? Like,
So-
why is it continuously 6 to 7 years?
They fund, so there's a couple of things. All 600 plus districts are on a ranked list based on our per pupil evaluation. So as our property values go up compared to other schools and their property values, we'll move down the list a little bit farther. So there's that. There's also, with the capital appropriations, the state will budget a portion for the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. And then school districts have 18 months to raise their local portion of that once they're in that classroom facilities assistance program. And so some schools might be able to raise their local portion if they pass their bond issue or whatever it is they're doing, however they're funding it. And then some schools might not be successful, and then they go back and they have to keep recycling through until we get on, until our turn comes up on that list. I think they told us last time there was like 21 or 22 districts in front of us. Yeah. So, and they're funding, I think, about 5 districts a year. So, and depending on if they can get their funding, depending how much the state appropriates.
About 5 districts a year out of 400 and some?
600 plus, yeah. Well, and a lot of districts have already been funded. Like where I grew up in Scioto County, my 8th grade year, I think it was, we got a new high school and a new elementary school, and they renovated the old high school into the middle school. And that was part of the classroom facilities program. So that was also another part of the DeRolf decision. The state started putting more money into capital funds for schools for that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So it's been going on for a while. So
I have a really good question. If I'm remembering correctly, and I may not be right, was private schools, are they able to get some of that funding now too?
Yeah, so the state started appropriating some funds for private schools.
So maybe we're getting bumped, right?
It's a possibility.
For some of these private schools too.
Yeah,
And I know President Huffman told me that he was going to take $4 million and build some private schools with our public funding, and that's what he did.
Yep. He sure did. So just a reminder, we have a cash balance and reserve policy. We developed it with our district finance committee. Requires 90-day unreserved cash for each year of the 5-year forecast period, and it triggers action by the board, superintendent, and treasurer if that benchmark's not met. And you've seen these slides before. I just wanted to share them again, just sort of level set. So We implemented a budget stabilization, which is 5% of preceding year revenues, and that's just a reserve in the fund that's still in our cash balance. It doesn't accumulate year over year. It's not accounted for separately. It's included in the 5-year forecast. And you can see that budget stabilization reservation there. So what we're talking about tonight, this is one of the funds, the special fund, the termination benefits fund. It sounds funny, but under Ohio law, our collective bargaining agreements and board policy, we have severance payments that we pay to employees upon retirement or payout for vacation. And then we have 26 pay periods a year. So we pay payroll biweekly. So every 10 years about, because of the calendar shift, we end up having a 27th pay period in a fiscal year. Now we do spread out contract salaries over 27 pays instead of 26 pays to help account for that so that we're not overpaying people. But once every 10th year, we have that irregular 27th pay. So that's what this fund is for. That's what this fund exists for, is to help districts kind of plan for those somewhat large expenses in the future and build up reserves for that. This fund can be rescinded in whole or in part at any time. And I do have some numbers on here that we'll go over in just a minute for that. And then the other special fund is the Capital Projects Fund. Again, this is allowed under Ohio Revised Code. And this will allow for us to accumulate resources for the acquisition, construction, or improvement of fixed assets, including motor vehicles. And this fund or the termination benefits fund is not included in the 5-year forecast. They are accounted for separately from the general fund. So, and then they must be obligated within 10 years. And again, the fund may be rescinded in whole or in part if needed. Just a reminder, this is what we did as part of the bond issue last year. We created a capital projects fund. We transferred $30 million. We had $170 million in need. We were able to, we would have been able to have bonds that would generate $140 million without additional millage from our community. And so we put that with the bond issue that we would have been able to address those projects. But since that bond issue failed with the operating levy back in November, the board rescinded that capital projects fund. We've since moved that money back to the general fund. And that's where it sits today, is in the general fund. During the last, I think it was the forecast presentation, might have been the board meeting before that, I shared a video clip of Representative Dave Thomas. He is a state rep that is out of the Ashtabula and Trumbull County area. He is spending a lot of time working on legislation for property tax reform. And so he has been very vocal, as have other legislators. And Senate President Rob McCauley held a press conference when they introduced the Senate's version of the budget with Senate Finance Chair Jerry Serino. And they talked about how schools should be allocating and reserving those funds if they have a use for them, and that they shouldn't be sitting in the general fund. And so that's the conversation that we're having today. Just a reminder, we had a whole committee that met during calendar year 2024. It was the Joint Committee on Property Tax Review and Reform. So a joint committee means that we had House members and Senate members that worked together. They met for hours and hours at a time over calendar year 2024. And a lot of really just, if you're really into this and want to learn about property taxes in Ohio, it's a great series of hearings to listen to. And I appreciated the members on the committee. They asked a lot of thoughtful and intentional questions. And they released their report, their final report, on December 31st, 2024. There's, I think, 21 or 22 recommendations, about 2.5 pages. Nowhere in that document is a cash cap or clawback. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. They had a whole committee that met, and that was nowhere in that report. So I continue to remind our legislators of that as well. And I think that report is actually linked on this graphic too, if you want to click on it and look at it later. Before we talk about levy types, let's talk real quick about the transfers. I think that would probably be a good conversation to have before we get into that. So this rather large spreadsheet that you have in front of you, and I apologize, this was too big to include on a slide. I will ask Jennifer to have this up on board docs so that people can see this. But if you start sort of like in the big list under capital projects fund, down towards the bottom of the spreadsheet, all of those areas, technology, business operations for professional and technical services, replacement equipment, contract repairs, secondary curriculum for equipment, instructional software and textbooks, elementary curriculum for instructional software and music equipment and recorders. These are all things that are currently in our budget, in our 5-year forecast. They're currently being paid for and funded out of our general operating fund. All of these things can be paid for out of a capital projects fund, as long as they have a useful life cycle of 5 years or more. They can be considered a fixed asset and be paid for out of that fund. And then I've just totaled those by category below that. It was helpful for me. I don't know why I did that, but anyway, just so you know what that is. And then above that is the termination benefits fund for what we have projected to pay in severance. So you can see on average, we pay about $1.3 million a year out in severance. Now that will change, ebb and flow, depending on retirements, changes in the retirement system, like all of those things. We've seen a lot of changes to our retirement systems, so those numbers will shift based on that. But essentially, what I've done is I've taken the first 5 years, so 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30, totaled those up, and then I carried them up top to that. If you look at the termination benefits fund where it says general transfers out, that total is $6.6 million. So that's what I'm proposing that we transfer out of the general fund from the balance to go into that termination benefits fund. And then I'm proposing that we remove the expenses from the general fund and start paying the severance out of that fund over the next 5 years. Does that make sense? And then for the capital projects fund, now if you look at that big list down at the bottom, you see that total for 2026 is $4.75 million that we're projected to spend out of the general fund. And then that total for the 10 years, that capital projects fund can be held up to 10 years. That total is $50.8 million. I'm not proposing that we transfer that much out of the general fund. For now, we're looking at that $40.6 million for the current year to transfer out. And then we would begin paying those expenses out of the general fund beginning next year. I want to make it clear that we've already had folks do their budgets for next year. I think what we'll look at just on the accounting side of coding those expenditures and not having everybody, I feel like it's going to be really confusing for everyone to try to work through that. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize it's really an accounting piece. So these are things that we're already paying for, and it's legal to pay for them out of the general fund or out of a capital or
Yes.
severance fund. And so we're just looking at accounting it differently. It really won't look different on the user end, whether it's with our leaders who are managing those funds or our ultimate student use.
Yeah. And so, and then looking at next year, we may need to transfer additional funds to get us to that amount. As you can see, we're still a little bit we're under in 2035 there. So we'll continue to monitor that, but we may see ongoing transfers if we're looking at maintaining that cap or cash balance. And I do think that we want to consider revisiting our cash balance policy when school gets back in and I start meeting with the finance committee again. We might want to consider having a conversation because we did talk about that as part of the finance committee. And the finance committee felt like that cap balance wasn't really necessary because of the nature of school funding. And, we continue to talk about how we're sort of on a bell curve. Sometimes we get money from the state, sometimes we don't get money from the state, right? But like eventually the funds, we go like this with funding. The committee had thought that a cap wasn't really necessary, but given the conversation we continue to have with the state about cash balances and the cap and all of those things, I think it would be helpful if we updated our policy to reflect something that we're comfortable with. But I'd like to work with the committee on that, the finance committee, and just kind of get there, because we did have that conversation and they didn't think that that was necessary, but I just want to follow back up, I think, this next school year and see about updating that policy.
Can I ask a question real quick just about the
Yes, please.
capital projects fund? It's a 10-year provision, right, on the capital projects fund?
Yeah, so what it says is it must be obligated within 10 years.
Obligated, okay. Just didn't have the language in my head. Okay.
That's in
And,
statute.
yeah, and just, I'm just thinking through the mechanics, right, of that, right? So say we move 40 million over, that means that we have to use or obligate 40 million in the next 10 years. We can then add 7 million next year, and it's like a rolling 10 years, right? Okay.
Yeah, and we would account for it basically on like a first in, first out.
Yeah, first out. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, thanks.
And not that we actually wouldn't need that money for capital improvement projects, but if we were to need some of that money, we can pull it back out at any
Yes,
time.
so so we're moving the expenses with it, so we are definitely going to use the funds. I think that if, something happened and we wouldn't need to worry about that cash cap. I mean, it's really just moving the balance and the expenses out of the general fund and accounting for it in a separate fund. Overall, it doesn't change the financial picture of our district. The cash balance is something that we have available to us now, but that will deplete over time. This isn't an ongoing revenue source for us. And so I think that this probably adds complication and makes it seem like that might be an ongoing revenue source, which just adds confusion to everything. I think it was much more clear in the forecast that you could see we have this cash balance now as our revenues and expenses aren't keeping up with our expenses. That cash balance is going to decline over time. But eventually, if we transfer this money out, we'll continue to pay for those expenses out of the other fund as that balance is still there. But once that balance is gone, all of those expenses will we'll have to adjust somehow, or they'll all come back to the general fund. And I don't think that there's a world where we cannot buy technology for a year or replacement equipment or contracted repairs. Textbooks and instructional materials, that's why we're here, is to educate kids. So I think that would be difficult to completely eliminate those expenses.
Because I love bad analogies with personal finance. It's a little bit like deciding you're going to open a savings account and you're going to pay your car payment and your mortgage out of it.
Yep.
Right? Same money, same expense. You just moved it over here.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not extra money. You're not hiding it. You still
Yeah.
have a plan to use it.
So it's sort of like if you think about, while this is a large amount all at once, but you can think of it like the car payment piece. Maybe I have a certain amount taken out of my check and put into a savings account every 2 weeks, but my car payment only comes out once a month. So I'm building up that amount to pay that payment. And that's essentially what this is doing.
And I think just to be blunt and call the elephant out in the room, we've always had this money in there with the intention of using it for these purposes, but our legislators don't trust that that's our purpose. So we're just making it crystal clear through accounting practices so that we don't have the resources that have already been provided by our taxpayers to pay for these things taken away.
Yeah. So that's this very large spreadsheet. Like I said, I'll post it later so that they have it on board docs. I'd like to kind of shift gears to levy conversation.
Before we go there, Nicole, so we're going to move this. Are we going to revisit this the next?
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have a resolution on the June 23rd agenda.
Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Thank you for
Thank you.
mentioning that. Excuse me. This slide was on our forecast presentation. Just a reminder of the different levy types. So schools, we have the ability to ask our community for property tax levies. There's various iterations of that, or income tax levies. And again, this is just for income taxes. We can only ask for residents, tax on the income of residents, but we aren't able to ask for, like, a city might be able to tax an income tax for people who work in their city. That's not the case for a school district income tax. The school district income tax only applies to residents of the school district, and it will apply to all residents of the school district.
And just to be clear, we've never passed an income tax.
No, we have not passed an income tax. We have not had a standalone income tax on the ballot in a few decades, I think, at least a couple of decades. I'd have to pull that up. But the last time we had an income tax, I think, was 2011, and it was combined with a property tax at that time. And I think it's probably been a while since any school district has passed a new income tax, honestly. And this is the conversation that the legislators are having. There was a, what do they call it? Property Tax Relief Act, something, House Bill 335. So some legislators have put together multiple bills in the name of property tax relief, and they've combined a lot of those bills into the House Bill 335. They had a press conference, it was about 33 minutes long, that they held the other day. It was House Ways and Means Chair, House Representative Member Romer, and Thomas is the Vice Chair. And they talked about wanting to provide property tax relief, and I believe it was Thomas that said, we told schools 6 months ago that they needed to diversify their revenue. And they are proposing eliminating the inside millage that we receive. So for us, on residential tax rates, about 39 mils, inside millage is about 3.8 of that, less than 10% of that. And that would go away. That's about a little over 16 million a year for us if that were to go through the way that it is. And that's set by the state constitution, so lots of conversations to be had around that. But in the press conference, and what I hear legislators continue to say is that schools should not continually go back for property taxes, and that they should be asking their community for income tax levies. We don't have the ability to ask for a sales tax or anything like that. So we can lobby the state for more funding through the school funding formula, or we can ask our community for additional funding to keep pace with inflationary increases that we're seeing in the cost of educating children. Those are really our options.
I just want to point out in passing that the inside mills are the only mills that House Bill 920 does not apply to.
Yes.
So they want to get rid of the millage when property values go up, that's the only millage where we get increased collections.
Yes.
And that's the part they want to get rid of.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Yes. So just a reminder, property taxes are levied on all real estate located within the district's boundaries. That's not exempted. House Bill 920 limits growth on all voted tax levies. So as values go up, the county auditor reduces tax rates. So the revenue that the district receives remains generally the same on those voted levies. And municipalities are able to limit or exempt growth on new construction. So that happens through economic development tools like tax incentive financing programs or community reinvestment areas through tax abatements. And we continue to have lots of conversations about those. For income taxes, schools can ask their community for a tax levied on income of all residents. So that's anyone residing within the district boundaries. And I keep hearing that renters don't pay property taxes. I think they do through rent, but just a reminder that even if you are renting, if you live in the district and you're gainfully employed, receiving an income, you would be subject to the school. Your employer is required to withhold school district income tax. And it can be based only on earned income. So there's a traditional income and then there's an earned income. And traditional is basically a tax on all income, and earned income is just wages. It doesn't apply to retirement income, investment earnings, or anything like that, or unemployment income. And income taxes are subject to the ebb and flow of the economy. So if incomes go up, we would see growth in those revenues. If incomes go down, we would see declines in those revenues. It's subject to that ebb and flow. Property taxes, because those amounts, when we pass a property tax levy, the county certifies the amount that levy will collect, and it will continue to adjust the rates as values go up, down, so that we collect that same amount year over year. And then if values go down, tax rates will go up, but only to the voted rate. So our last levy was 5.9 mils, operating levy was 5.9 mils. It's probably collecting around 3.5 mils today, probably lower than that with 2023 reappraisals. But if values went up, that might bump up a little bit, but it would never go above 5.9 mils. So that's just kind of how that works. So just a note about those. And then I shared this also. This is from the Legislative Service Commission. This was a member brief released February 4th, 2025. This just shows what school districts have income taxes. And then it highlights county boundaries too. So just a note, and I wish I would have pointed us out. So we are right there. Can you see us? That white. So Big Walnut, I think, is this district up here. It's hard to get that straight from this far back. So you can see where we are. Lots of schools have income taxes around the state.
Sorry, quick question. Just to clarify on the earned income, is it, so it's earned, but is it W-2 income only? Or, I mean, what are the different sources of, you know what I mean?
Well, it might be, it would probably be business, if you
income.
are in the district, yeah. I think it would apply to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was I going to say about that? Oh, the timing. I'll talk about that on this slide. When we look at revenue generated, so income taxes versus property taxes. So income taxes, we can only ask for increments of 0.25%. So a traditional income tax, 0.25%, would generate about $10.4 million a year. Earned income would be about 8.7. So you can see those differences with those different increments down the table. And then property taxes, a mill for us is about 4.3 million. That's based on our assessed values at the county. And you can see what 2 mills, 3 mills, 4 mills, 5 mills, 6 mills.
Nicole, for the estimates here on the income taxes, is that based on approximately what people in the district are making now, like this year?
Yeah, so I got these numbers from the Department of Taxation. They give us these estimates. They said that they will be updating those income tables sometime this month.
Okay.
And so that may change in the future. But they acted like it wouldn't be a huge change.
How often do they update them?
Once a year.
Okay.
And
So
one-
annually.
One thing to point out too is there is pending legislation that would be capped at a 1% that we would be able to ask for.
Yes, that is true. Also, just a reminder, the timing. So property taxes follow a tax year. So if we were on the ballot in November for tax, that would be for tax year 2025, we would start seeing collections in calendar year 2026, which would mean we'd see a half year of collections in fiscal year 26 and then a full year beginning in 27. For an income tax, there is an 18-month sort of phase-in window. And so we wouldn't realize, it would sort of be a little wonky for those until that 18-month time period, and we could realize full collections going forward. So just a note about that. I think this is my last slide. Yeah, it is. So I want to turn it over to Carrie because I just want to make sure that the board's aware and that our community is aware when we talk about capital projects. So this capital projects fund, we're essentially taking things that we would already be paying for out of our general fund, just for general upkeep, anything that would be a fixed asset that we would normally pay for out of our general fund, to shift into that fund and to pay for that. But we have overall hundreds of millions of dollars of capital needs that we have no funding for. And so I want Carrie to share some information with us about that.
You sound great.
Yeah.
They put dust together.
So the information in front of you is just put together some deferred project considerations that we have on the operation side of the house. It includes in our IT world a one-to-one technology plan in which there's been a lot of discussion and desire to have this opportunity for our students. It also includes continuing the teaching wall upgrades at the 6 elementary school buildings remaining to be done. So all of our secondary buildings have been completed. At the elementary level, the buildings that have been renovated have had this upgrade done. So these are the 6 buildings that remain at the elementary schools that currently have a setup very similar to this. It also includes upgrades to our server switchgear infrastructure, security panel replacements. All of these things are general preventative maintenance and or replacement cycles on equipment. So we're going to need to do some of these things soon, but we've deferred them as we deal with available funding. We have what we have. Additionally, on here included are the numbers that were part of the bond project that was not successful in November. So you have numbers on here for Charrington, Huber. I apologize, Huber's on here twice. One of those should say Robert Frost. My apologies. So Charrington, Huber Ridge, Blendon, and Walnut Springs were the buildings that we discussed with the levy. But to remember that the facility master plan was originally to include all 6 of those buildings, plus Westerville North back in 2019 when the facility master plan was adopted. So all of those numbers were provided by Elford in their March of 2024 proposal for that work, which is how we decided to move forward with the 6 buildings that were on that ask. So you see those numbers there. Those numbers do not include the inflationary rates we've seen since then either, so take that into consideration. You will see 2 numbers for Westerville North. It's a renovation and partial replacement of the building and or full replacement of the building. And to understand, with OFCC, the Expedited Local Partnership Program that Nicole mentioned earlier, if a building hits 2/3 rule, and what that is that the cost of renovation becomes 2/3 of what the replacement value is, they will recommend you replace the building. So that's why both of those numbers are included. That's not a decision that's been made, but both of those numbers are included. We also talk about roofing projects, oftentimes much like at home. just because the shingles have a 50-year life cycle, when it becomes time to replace them, you can work with a roofing company to determine if now's the time or not. So we do have some deferred roofing projects that we are aware of. Our high school theater renovations, those were part of the ask in November. If anybody has spent any time in our 3 different high school theaters, we know that it is time to make some investment in some of them more so than others, but everybody needs some attention. And that's the numbers you see there. Those spaces are as much used for our school events as they are for our community. So we keep those on a rolling plan as we can address needs as they come along. Parking lot and playground resurfacing and preventative maintenance. We've done a really good job with those bond funds of addressing some of our parking lots as we've been able to. As everybody knows, there's a lot of asphalt in this district. We have nearly 30 buildings and we have lots of parking lots that surround them. The other thing that we are seeing with a growing special needs population in our schools, we need to address our playground surfaces as well, and our access to the equipment along with the equipment, the playground equipment that's out there as well. Balcony enclosures at McVeigh, Wilder, and Heritage Middle School, we actually deferred that project this year as well. We're looking at safety enclosures for those spaces, along with helping with the sound. When those buildings were constructed, there are classrooms that face those open spaces. And so when you have lunch going on or an assembly going on, it can be very disruptive for the rest of the building. That would help at all 3 of those locations. Always plumbing and electrical infrastructure upgrades. Again, think about your home. Everything has to be addressed at some point. We do things as they become urgent. Remember, our goal is always warm, safe, and dry. Building envelopes, preventative maintenance. So these are buildings that have to be cared for. So you're looking at, we've spent, the board has approved the ceiling of some of our split block out surface of our buildings. We've had some envelopes where the roof and the building meet that have had to be addressed. Some masonry work, things that need to be done. I believe it's Genoa that's getting done this summer. We did Central last. So not fancy things, but necessary to maintain our buildings. And then we've identified, so with the Westerville South project coming, getting wrapped up, what was bid and presented to the community back in 2019, we've lived in it. The students have attended, the teachers have worked through that. We're very grateful for that, but we've identified additional needs that building has. It would be an additional project. So you'll see that number on there as well. So grand total for all of the things that I've gone through, $365,195,424 if you renoed north. Those are some big numbers, but those are deferred projects. If you look at just the project outside of the facility master plan, so everything else that I mentioned outside of the facility master plan, that's 27.5 million almost in projects of just deferred projects that we can do if we had the funding to do so.
So I just want to remind everybody that in addition to these projects, we also have permanent improvement levies and a fund that pays for ongoing building repairs and maintenance and school repairs.
Yeah.
So what Doug presented to us tonight with the tracks, that's being paid for out of our permanent improvement levy dollars. And that generates roughly a little over $9 million a year through those levies.
Those permanent improvement not only does some of the projects in which you heard, like track replacements, we will HVAC projects, just depends on what the project needs are, urgent needs for that year. But we also pay for our buses and our MyVan replacements. Our buses are on a 14-year replacement cycle. Our MyVans are on a 7. Custodial equipment replacement, gotta keep the buildings clean. Our maintenance vehicles, AV upgrades, musical equipment replacement. It's also an important thing that we do with our permanent improvement dollars. Furniture replacement as well. So we make those dollars go pretty far considering the square footage.
And Carrie, just to put in perspective, when we talk about 9 million in PI funds roughly a year, what do we typically have in HVAC a year, and how many buildings does that cover? Just to kind of give the scope of that, and or maybe the roofing, just to kind of put some context to those numbers when we're talking about taking care of 30 different facilities across the district.
So you heard Doug mention that we have about $4 million in HVAC projects a year right now. It varies by building. It's hard to say like we do 4 or 5 buildings a year because it depends on the age of the unit and the time that it needs to replace it. So a building like South can have 10 units on the roof, and they're not all going to need replaced at the same time. You have a smaller building like Emerson, you might have 3 or 4 units that need to be replaced. So we probably have 4 to 5 projects a year, and you spend about $4 million right now. And you think about the cost of that equipment and the inflationary rates and what's coming in the near future potentially with our tariffs, those costs are only going to grow. Roofing, you're about $1.5 million a year in roofing projects, also with parking lots as well.
So probably over half of that money between roofing and HVAC just are regularly scheduled replacement cycles for all the buildings we have.
Correct.
So that money doesn't last long, I guess is the point I wanted to make. So as we look at the other things that need done, we have to make a lot of choices.
We do.
And I just want to note, because I did ask our logistics department about the cost of a school bus. Do you have that? Do you want to share that?
I do. So our cost of a school bus, 2020, 5 years ago. I'm sorry, 2022. It was $105,245. FY26, we are planning for a standard school bus, so not one with a wheelchair lift, at $152,153.66. Our My Vans, when we started the program in 2018, we were spending $37,000 on My Vans. We're planning to spend, I like numbers. We're not planning to spend what we're required to spend now. It's costing us $75,000 a van.
That 37 was just one.
One. Per vehicle.
Mhm.
They have doubled.
And those vehicles are paid for out of that PI fund. And there's, like she said, we have the schedules that we have them on, so there's different amounts paid. How many did we buy this? I feel like I just signed off on like 12 or.
It was 12 and 25. We have 16 being replaced this FY26. That's the plan, is to replace 16 buses each year and 7 My Vans.
And I think you've mentioned this before, but that replacement cycle is really determined by maintenance costs and like hitting that sweet spot, right, of where we're spending more to fix things, and it makes more sense at that point to replace.
And that really does come into play with the My Vans. We're able to maximize a trade-in value and get every bit of the warranty while we have it. Anything outside of that, you're looking at increased mechanic costs as well as things that we have to send out for the warranty work to be, or then what would have been warranty work to be completed. Everything else we can handle in-house within that 7 years on the My Van with our very talented and dedicated mechanics that we have over at Transportation. Same with our buses.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, so not counting what we're already addressing with our PI funds on an annual basis, which isn't really a ton, but we still have over $300 million worth of just needs for our facilities that's been identified today.
Correct. Yeah, and that includes our facility master plan.
Mhm. And how often do we look at the facility master plan and update?
So this last cycle was on a 5-year. So as we approached the first 5 years, we started looking at the buildings that were identified in the second 5 years of the facility master plan. That's also when we identified we needed to move out of a 10-year plan. Just the cost, the inflationary rate of cost of construction and the renovations itself had grown, was it 32% on average? So we knew we had to amend what we thought we were initially going to be able to do within a 10-year period. Our buildings will continue to age. There is a gap between the facility master plan identified buildings and the next set of buildings until they turn that age 50 to 55 that we start to look at renovation. I think it's about 14 years that we really have a gap in there before we have the buildings that were built in the 80s.
So I think, my point in wanting to have this conversation is to just share, to make sure that everybody understands, and I just want to make sure that it's open and transparent, that our cash balance wouldn't be enough to address the needs of the district that we do have. We are using our cash balance to continue operations as best that we can. Our revenues are not keeping pace with inflationary increases on any level. And so, we are at a point to where we need to ask our community for more money. We need the state to fund its share of education, or we need to make some really serious, significant cuts to our, I'm talking closing buildings and significantly reducing services overall to our students.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Carrie, and everyone. Thinking about all of this, and what would you recommend?
I think we need to have an understanding of what we're comfortable with, where our revenues and expenses are upside down by over $20 million a year. We need to generate $20 million a year, at least, more year over year. I think that if we asked for an income tax levy, I think we would probably be at about 0.75% to be able to keep up, especially when you figure in that 18-month window, and whether that's in November or if that conversation happens in next year in the spring or in the fall. We have to take that into account. And then for property taxes, we probably need to be at around close to 6 mils, 5 to 6 mils, depending on.
And if we went with an income tax, an earned income tax, or an income tax, a traditional, when do we need to do we need to make a resolution next
Yeah,
board
so
meeting?
if we wanted to be on the ballot this November, we would have to have a resolution for property taxes by the June 23rd, the next board meeting, June 23rd, to be certified by the county. And then we would come back with the second resolution in July. And that has to be filed by I think it's August 6th is the deadline. Yeah. It's the same as candidate petitions. Everything's due by that date. For income taxes, the resolution would have to be approved in July and still have that same August 6th deadline. There's only the one resolution to the Department of Taxation. So I guess I should clarify, the 0.75% would be if it were an earned income. If we looked at a traditional income, because it's only 0.25% increment, it would, I wouldn't go above 0.5%, but that would be tight, I think, as we're looking at things moving forward. And I think that we would, if we're on the ballot in November, or whenever we're on the ballot again, I think we would need to have a very clear conversation with our community and with our board about what we would have to look at, where we would need to make reductions if it weren't successful.
I know, we have to make some decisions, right? I worry that, I know we don't know what's coming from the state whatsoever, but we can't wait around for that either. We have to move forward, and I think we have to be on the ballot in November. I guess for me, that's just where I am. I'm trying to figure out which is a better avenue, right? And I do like this earned income idea because it doesn't harm the poor. It doesn't harm people that maybe are living on a retirement budget, or maybe are unemployed. I do like that aspect of it.
Regarding not knowing what we're going to get from the state, I think everybody understands how this works, but let's just be clear, it's not going to be better than the Senate version. Right,
Yeah.
the House and Senate are going to conference,
So I
so
think
it's not, there's no magic in there.
I'm not aware of any magic that's left. But, so Senator Jerry Serino is the chair for the Senate Finance Committee. And during testimony with OASBO, Katie Johnson, the executive director of OASBO, he said the Senate's version is the best version you get, and you better get on board with it. So what I've shared with our legislators, local and abroad, is that our district will continue to thoughtfully plan and try to make decisions that will have minimal impact on students as best that we can. But at the end of the day, I think that it's up to our community, and we have to remember that our schools belong to our community. This is, what does our community want for its school system? You all represent our community at this level, and so I think it's, ultimately where we think we need to be.
So from a timing standpoint, I think just quite bluntly, what it comes down to is, we've talked before, we have cash. We're living off our savings account. Sorry. We can either spend it down more before we go on the ballot, but then if we don't pass, it's critical and we're cutting immediately a lot. Or we try now when we still have a little bit of runway. But there's a confusion piece, right? Where we have to try to educate people, don't always understand the difference between a deficit and what is in our cash balance, and the fact that the cash balance is depleting.
And now that we're making transfers, I think that is just going to be wholly confusing for everybody. And I want to make it very clear that these transfers will not impact any levy need. It's just shifting where we're paying
accounting
for stuff from. It's just accounting for things differently. It does not affect our levy timing. Our revenues are not keeping up with our expenses. So we either need to increase our revenues or we need to reduce our expenses. And there is no, that's just how that math works.
Which that's not new. That's why we were on the ballot in the fall.
Right.
And we were obviously unsuccessful. So fortunately, at that point, we did have a cash balance. And so we have made some austerity measures, but we're not at this devastating cut level. Again, the longer we wait to go back on, so the decision now is, do we put something on in November? Do we wait until next calendar year? The longer we wait, the more, if it doesn't pass, we're going to have to cut. So that's kind of the discussion and the point that, you all have to decide on.
Well, in particular, if you're talking income tax with the 18-month, we can't wait until next year and then have another 18 months.
That puts us out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a long ways out.
The hard piece is, again, I'm just in a really candid mood tonight, is that the legislators and the narrative that they've told around this budget puts us in a really difficult place of trying to secure additional revenue, because they're trying to tell a story that we have money we don't need. I think we've demonstrated tonight we need more than what we have, but that's not the narrative that they've been telling the public. So we are combating that, and that's going to be a difficult piece for us.
Well, I think we need to, we've talked about this so much, right? We've continued to talk about it. I know, I could go back and watch all of these videos if I wanted to. I would hope that our community would watch, listen, share, and combat that. And I feel like the more people I'm talking to out and about, they're starting to actually really talk about these things, they're listening. And so I feel that we just need to continue to do that. I guess my question is, if we went with an earned income tax, we aren't able to collect for 18 months. Does that harm us? Do we have to make any cuts as a result of that? Or we're going to say we don't know what's happening at the state level. And so, there's that precautionary.
So I think at the 0.75% and taking into account the 18-month window, I think that we don't know what the state budget's going to do. Regardless of any school funding formula, it's never going to be enough to make up the $20+ million shortfall in revenue. I think that I think it's just going to get harder the longer that we wait. The property tax piece, like I said, that's always a year behind. So the 25 collection and 26 because of that tax year. So it's really what I guess makes sense for our community. And when you think about our community, we have a very large disparity in wealth in our community, from property values to income. I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew what made sense. I wish we had a reliable school funding formula. I wish that the state would do its part and we would know what we have coming our way year over year. I wish that we had a revenue source that would keep up with inflation increases, at least provide for some inflationary increases. I just, I think the timing with the 18-month window, I think we would be fine with the 0.75% overall. And as I've said, that is going to ebb and flow with the economy and those incomes. So if incomes go down, that revenue will go down. If incomes go up, that revenue will increase. So, and I'm not saying if we pass an income tax levy, we will never need another tax levy. I want to make that very clear. We are going to continue to have to go back to our voters in the future if we see large increases in need without adequate funding that we've seen historically.
Or, for example, the inside millage goes away.
The inside millage, that's
legislative
another
things that could
$16
happen.
million if that were to go away. When we have conversations about economic development and the tax abatements and the TIFs and all of those things, like all of that has the ability to impact our potential for growth and revenue going forward. So it's just a conversation we'll have to continue to have over and over again.
In terms of, so if we were talking about an earned income tax in terms of, what rate, I think for me, what is the July, what meeting we would have to?
It's the only meeting we have in July. It's July the 9th, I think.
July 9th, okay. So I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, the
7th.
state will probably sign a budget June 30th. There've been a couple times when it's crept into July, which is why just want to make sure.
Yeah,
it wasn't-
so a couple bienniums ago, they did a temporary measure for the first couple weeks in July.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know, they seem to be getting these passed
Yeah, it
through
doesn't-
pretty quickly. It doesn't seem
It doesn't
to be.
seem like that's where we're going to end up.
Doesn't
But-
seem like it.
But for me, the question is, I mean, there is a pretty big difference between where the House is right now and where the Senate is.
Yep.
So like, if we knew we were going to be where the Senate is, I would say, okay, I'm thinking 3/4. But if we end up closer where the House is, the timing works out well for us to consider it might need to be higher than that.
Yeah.
So we will know. That was the whole point in waiting.
Mm-hmm.
We will know. And then if we decide that it's the way I would lean is earned income, but where that rate needs to end, I need to see where we end up. And it fortunately works out. We can wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these will be adjusted slightly too, once the Department of Taxation gets their numbers updated. He didn't give me any particular date on that. He said it should be sometime this month. So before we'd have that, if we're looking at income taxes, we would have some updated numbers before the board would consider that resolution. Property taxes, like I said, if we want to be on for property taxes, we would have to have the first round of legislation by the 23rd, the next meeting.
And just, this might be a dumb question, but the income tax, if we were to pass an earned income tax, that doesn't have like a sunset date. It's not like this will be an income tax for 15 years and then it goes
would be-
away.
We would do it continuing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we had a 4.9 mil levy on the ballot in November because we needed it. It's not like those needs mysteriously
We've since
disappeared.
we've since made a lot of cuts. I
Yeah.
mean, we have eliminated over 30 positions in the district, and I like to remind people that we didn't have 33 people sitting around doing nothing in
Yeah.
this district. That means a lot of people are doing a lot more with less. I think that, we've heard conversations about class sizes and all of those things, but I think we're going to have to continue to make cuts if we don't see additional revenues in the future.
And the needs are all still there.
We did this, and we talked about this in the fall, and I think we did a good job today talking about, projected projects, what we're spending overall. But could you remind us what the dollar amount is in terms of our expenditures on a day-to-day basis, district-wide? Like, per day, how much are we spending?
We spend over $600,000 a day.
So that's a lot of money.
And
when
that's
you
based
add
on a
that up.
365-day year, so that's not just the 180 days that school's open.
Thank you.
So I kind of feel like we need to have an understanding of where we all are, right? Because our next meeting is the 23rd. Like Jen, I think it's, for me, I've already said, I'm leaning towards earned income. I do believe we need to be on the ballot in November. I do appreciate that we have that ability to say, is it 0.75 or is it 1, knowing what we get back from the General Assembly. But I'm just curious as to where you two are.
I know we discussed this earlier in the week. I think I'm the type of person I like to weigh out the pros and cons. For me, I think from today to the end of the week, it'll be connecting with community members, really understanding, making sure that we're taking into account what their needs are, how do they feel about this, so that I can make a final judgment. But right now, I think I am definitely leaning towards the earned income option.
I'm in the same spot. I mean, we needed the money last November. The reason we punted from May was so that we could, like you said, understand what's coming down the pike from the state legislative budget, as well as if there were going to be any significant impacts federally. I don't know that we have a good necessarily understanding of the federal piece quite yet, but we will at least know the state budget piece by the end of this month. I don't foresee them taking longer than they need to. I do think the income tax piece is interesting because one of the things that we do hear quite a bit, especially from older property owners, community members, is that they're being essentially taxed out of their homes because it's all property taxes all the time. So the earned income piece would kind of alleviate that from those adults who prefer to age in place, because this would not be taxing their retirement, income. So that's an interesting, I think, avenue to look at with this. And it does give us the flexibility to understand what we do need to raise. I would be shocked if there was a bunch of community members out there who were like, no, please increase my property taxes. But, nobody wants to pay taxes, period, but services require money.
So, I'm sorry, are you both thinking November too? Okay.
Just want to add the last piece about property taxes. Is there's so much conversation, and we see this about property tax reform, and what is that really going to mean? That I take the advice to heart that we should try to diversify, our revenue streams. So, I was here in 2011 when that ballot issue didn't pass. It was combined income and operating. I think we're in a very different place. And so I appreciate, again, the way this lines up and that we have the time to wait and watch and to hear from folks. But yeah, I think we've got to do something, and we have to do it this fall. That's my opinion.
Okay, so I think we feel pretty comfortable with going forward in the fall with an earned income. I guess, Anissa, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, and then.
And what we're not hearing, though, is you want us to bring something back next meeting about property tax, and that's the big piece we need to know right now.
Yeah, and we'll know something by the end of this month as to what the state's gonna do. We'll be able to make a more informed decision.
But we will miss the timeline for the property taxes.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure
yeah,
that's clear.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, at least what I heard was we're interested in the earned income piece of it.
Okay.
All right. Well, that was, thank you. Thanks for.
That's a lot, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
but it
always a
was
lot.
all good information, and I appreciate the people that actually stayed for all of that too. Okay, so do we need a motion to move back into? Okay. So board comments. Who would like to start? Well, I can, I guess. Okay, nobody will. I want to take a moment and really thank, we have great partners in the Westerville City School District, and I want to thank the Westerville City Council for passing a resolution last Tuesday night in support of public education and in support of us receiving our full funding. I also want to thank Janet Davis in the Westerville Chamber of Commerce. She and the Westerville Chamber sent a letter to our legislators as well and to the governor in support of school funding. And I think that's really important to show that we have support from our local government. We also have support from our businesses. But also just thank you to all the community members, families, students that have gone down to testify or reached out to our legislators. It's really important. And I'd say please keep doing so. But thank you. I know it does take time, but it has been really encouraging to be out in public and hear people talking about this. I really also want to extend a huge thank you to everyone that put so much time and effort into making sure that our graduations went off without a hitch. It takes a lot of staff and resources and time to nail that down perfectly. And wow, what a wonderful time it was. And just congratulations again to the seniors. So I'm all about gratitude tonight. I also want to take a moment to thank our teachers and staff for another really successful year. I know it's been rough. You know, I'm sure you feel like you're being attacked at all sides. And we're not sure what's happening down at the State House. But it's because of you guys that maybe a student got curious or interested in something new, finished the year strong. My children as well, so thank you. Graduated, felt comforted, you know, smart, and just so much more. And so it was fun to be out, as I had said, talking to families. And one of the, I heard a lot from students about how much they love their teachers and staff. And I also heard from one student who said, no, I'm not happy that it's summer. I really want to be in school, which I was shocked. I've never heard that before. But I think what that really says, so I think that what it really says is that they feel cared for, right, by all of you. And they walk in that building and they feel seen. So I simply just want to say thank you. I value all of you and really am in awe of each of you. And you walk into this district every day with all this outside noise and you put it aside and you focus in. So just thank you. And then with that, I just hope everyone has a great summer. If you're having a summer, I know that the students have these rituals for winter, right? What are they like? Put so many ice cubes in the toilet. Could we maybe do some for some sun and warm weather? I very much appreciate that. But that is it for me. Just a lot of gratitude. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I echo all of that. Really and truly congratulations to our 1,400 plus grads. That was really awesome to witness. But also congratulations again to our retirees. It's always wonderful when we come to these meetings and we sadly see people leave the workforce, but also just being in awe of what they've been able to contribute to this district. And then to our athletes who were recognized today, that's awesome. So congratulations to them as well. I would say on my end, we went through a lot right now. I think, Nicole, and Angie, I appreciate when we asked you guys, in just 3 bullet points, what can we have the community members take away from this meeting today? But there will be a lot more questions after this meeting, and so please reach out to me, to everyone on this board, because this is a lot of information to digest in just one sitting. But I think I've been very proud of the advocacy and the leadership. I mean, we're really killing it as a school district, and we're getting that feedback. So these clawbacks and these proposals are terrible on all fronts, but I think the work that we're doing is making some difference. And I think we can get bogged down with the negative, but also we really are doing a great job as a district. And so just want to encourage you guys to continue the advocacy, because we do have some time until Wednesday and beyond to apply pressure to Governor DeWine.
I echo all of the congrats and thank yous and all of that. Graduation is a very long day for us, but there are so many wonderful moments throughout graduation, and congratulations to all of the graduates, because whether you're going on to college, getting a job, going to the military, it's a big deal. It's a big celebration. So I hope they're all taking time to celebrate and reflect on their journeys. And thank you to all of the teachers, the administrators, everybody in this district who helps make that possible. So thank you. I also wanted to thank our community in myriad different ways. They've been very helpful, and especially our advocates who have been pushing the state legislators, the state senators, Governor DeWine. This comes down to choices. There are a lot of choices being made with the budget. There's a lot of talk from a lot of different legislators about protecting of our kids, giving them opportunities, but from what I see, a lot of times with public schools, they're making choices that actually go against those values. And there are reasons for that. If they were to put the money that they're using on vouchers, yes, I will bring up the vouchers again, towards public schools instead of putting that money into private coffers, we could fund the formula. That is real. That is absolutely real. But there are many lawmakers who would rather move towards education privatization. That is what some of these lawmakers ultimately want. So K through 12 education becomes a monetized commodity instead of a public good. Different schools can charge different prices. Different schools teach kids different things. So it's not a good situation. These are choices that I hope our lawmakers end up seeing the value in choosing all of Ohio's kids and funding public schools. I don't know that we're going to get anywhere close to what we need, but if we can continue to apply that pressure so that we can get as best as we can this go round, that's important. And I think that in even number election cycles, really helping educate folks who care about public education about who they're voting for the state legislature, because they hold a lot of power and they make a lot of choices, and not all of them are great. So.
So, all the same congratulations and thank you, but I want to just I want to paint a picture for you just for a minute of graduation from a board member's point of view, right? So we stand there, sit, stand. We get to hear wonderful speeches by students who they get chosen to have this opportunity to speak to that whole expo center full of people and their peers, many of whom they'll never see again, and their teachers, many of whom they'll never see again. And we get to hear them decide, what's the most important thing I can say today? We get to sit there and listen to it for all 3 high schools. And then shake every single hand. I'm going to tell you, your right arm gets real sore. It does. By the end of it, it's like, man, my shoulder is it's killing me by the end of the day. But I cannot convey, so just imagine student after student, name after name, every one of them is an individual that public education has given an opportunity. Some of them come across crying. Some of them come across wanting to run off because frankly, it's terrifying up there, can be. Some of them, you see them just run up and they want to hug that teacher. Some of them choose a teacher who was their first grade teacher, right? Or their kindergarten teacher. And that person made such a difference in their life that when they got to be a senior and they thought, who's going to give me my diploma? It's going to be that one. They changed my life ever since they were my teacher. And so to experience that day up there on the stage and see every single one of those students come across reminds us all why public education has to exist. And so, like everyone else, I am truly grateful for the people who've been advocating for public education. I want to especially thank, Ms. Marshall, Ms. Hamburg, President Meyer's been down there more times than I can count and taken students. Some of us have day jobs that don't allow that much flexibility, and you know what? Like for me, I have to be okay with that because I have a day job, but I know that they're doing it for all of us. And so I find ways to advocate in other ways. But just think about every one of those kids, no, not kids when they come across the stage of graduation, every one of those young adults coming across there because this community and our state put money into their future. So when I hear people say things like, I've never had any kids, why should I have to pay for public education? I want to say things like, do you ever want to hire an accountant? Do you ever want to fly in an airplane? Do you ever want to drive on a road? Do you ever want to go to the doctor? Do you ever want to go to a park and hear a great talk from a park ranger? That's why. That's why. So thank you all who believe in it and continue to advocate. Thanks.
With that, the board will meet in regular session on Monday, June 23rd at 6 p.m. at the Early Learning Center, 936 East Wind Drive, Westerville, Ohio, which is here. And we are going to move into executive session. You're welcome to stay, but may I have a motion to enter into executive session for the purposes of discussing the employment and compensation of public employees?
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Did you vote?
Yes. Sorry. It's been a
Mrs.
while.
Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
It's 8:52.
It's 9:34 and we're back. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Will you take the vote?
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Lieband?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yep.